Oh, okay. I think we're here. I know we're early today. Okay, I get it. We have we usually start a little later in the program. Um that combined with daylight savings time being a thing, uh yeah, we'll see who shows. We see who knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on half the time, but we're here. And yeah, we'll see how this goes tonight. We got a lot to talk about. I didn't expect to be going live early, but last night, well, actually, over the weekend, more particularly, I came across an event that had escaped my notice when it happened. However, once I did get wind of it and look into it, it's something that I had to talk about. And I had to talk about it as soon as I could, right? Um I already had a segment lined up today and I didn't want to cancel that because I also want to go through that. But I was like, well, you know what? We can fit this in too. It's not something I have to spend all day on, but it is something I want to get off my chest, right? To talk a little bit about and just kind of give my thoughts on the whole situation. First of all, conservative liberalism, hello, hello, thank you for being here. Nice to see you. 𝕬𝖎, hello as well. We're here, we're ready, we're gonna get it done. How's my audio? Is the visuals good? I hope everything's working out great. Let's see what you guys have to say. I don't know what's going on either, but I'm faking until I make it. That's the spirit. 𝕬𝖎 says, Wpath leaks finally on the docket. We will finally know where the dentist money went. Oh, fun fact, my dental appointment is on the 20th. Ooh. I don't know if they're going to fix it particularly, but I will be going into the dentist on the 20th. So, yay. That is the thing that is happening. Yeah. 808 says best of luck. Well, thank you. Thank you, 808. Hopefully it's as easy as they made it out to be on the phone. We'll find out. But not what I came here to talk about. Vodka Paka. Hello, hello, hello. All's good. Also, if any federal agents are reading this, all my posts are 100% serious, and I am a threat to society. Brucro, hello, hello, hello. Nice to see you. Actually happy to have you all here. No Cow Mike says, Wick, if your early guest can't make it, you can talk about the Oscars. Well, I don't have an early guest. I'm going to do a little solo dolo here and talk about, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Guernica. Guernica magazine. So the magazine itself is named after a pretty famous Picasso painting. Very anti-war painting. It's fairly famous. I don't have it up right like to show you, but look it up. It's fairly common in the art world to refer to this and things like that. So the magazine, as you could probably infer based on its title, is a pretty anti-war magazine, right? And they've done a lot of work elevating Palestinian voices in this. Poetry and other articles from the Palestinians' perspective is something that they focus on. And I think that's a great thing to do, right? It's important to see the voices of all those involved in this struggle and kind of see what they have to say to kind of get their perspective, to not let it be lost, right? And that's why again, I'm not an avid reader, but it's something I would check out on occasion. So last time I went to check it out, however, I saw a post that they had taken a recent article that they had published down. The article itself, hold on, let me get it, was called From the Edges of a Broken World, and they published it, I want to say in the beginning of March. But they unpublished it. They retracted it. They took it down. And so I was like very curious, like what the hell was this? Like what did it say? I wanted to know. I was very curious. So I found people talking about it on Twitter, and I went and I looked into the whole situation, and let me tell you, gang, it infuriated me. It infuriated me. I was livid by the time I was done reading not just Twitter, but the article itself, and then the controversy surrounding the article, etc. So let me give you guys a little TLDR on what exactly happened. So this article got published, okay? And then several of the editors and one of the publishers of this magazine resigned in protest that they would dare publish this. Here are some of the comments that were made by these people. Okay. So 𝕾𝖎, who was interview's editor, wrote that parts of the essay felt particularly harmful and disorienting to read. 𝕵𝖎𝖙, who was senior editor, accused Israel of apartheid and genocide, which, okay. And 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝍍𝖔𝖜, formerly a fiction editor, wrote that the magazine is a pillar of eugenicist white colonialism masquerading as goodness. That's some heavy accusations, right? Damn. Some of the other people wrote that 𝕾𝖍𝖎, who apparently, I'm not sure if she is the prior co-publisher, 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, who resigned over this, to be clear, wrote this about the article. It is, among many things, a hand-wringing apologia for Zionism and the ongoing genocide in Palestine. From the edges of a broken world in Israel, a translator tries to tread the line of empathy. That's the name of the title. 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 wrote that she is deeply ashamed that the piece ran and sincerely apologizes to the writers, readers, and supporters who felt betrayed by this decision. Damn! Like, this is really like, what the fuck is this article, right? Like, so I was really curious to read this, right? I was like, what the hell did they publish? So I found it. Like I said, I saw a bunch of Twitter threads on this as well, right? Talking about this. Everyone has opinions on this, okay? We're going to go through it. But I got to the article itself. It's fairly lengthy for an article, right? It's about I don't even know how many pages, but it's about 20 pages, I would say, maybe 15, something like that. It wasn't like a 2-minute read. So I go through it, I read it, I consider it, I read it again. And the second time I read through, I'm looking for reasons why people would be mad at this, because in my first go through, it's just it's the most lukewarm thing that I could ever read. $10 from 𝕍𝖎. Why do we act like younger generations will eventually become less radical? Extremism is already in our organizations. Thus, just publishing pro-Israel piece is enough for this ruckus. #CommieAmerica2050. Gang, we're gonna go over this article and read it together. Okay, that's what we're gonna do, and you are going to tell me if this is pro-Israel or not. Because what this is, gang, it's an article from a translator who lives in Israel, who would drive Palestinian children to the hospital, right? Volunteered her time to drive Palestinian children to the hospital to get treatment, who donated blood to Gaza, right? Who refused to serve in the IDF. This is the person they're calling a Zionist apologist, and right? Just to be clear, who this person is. Joanna Chen is her name. And in the article, all she does is talk about how her life changed after October 7th, where she came from, how she viewed the world and dealt and lived in the world, and how October 7th changed that and changed those around her. It doesn't excuse anything that's happened. It doesn't justify anything that happens. It doesn't even try to, right? It's not about that. This piece is a thoughtful piece, right? And whether you agree with her perspectives or not, and we'll go through it, don't worry. But it's a thoughtful piece on what it was like to live in Israel after the aftermath of October 7th, as someone who worked and helped and volunteered for pro-Palestinian organizations and things like that. This is what they're calling Zionist apologia. And gang, I was angry. I was livid. I was upset. It's like she had to apologize for her existence. I don't know any other group that has to apologize for simply being alive than someone from Israel, right? It's wild to me. Let's read the article, and you guys can see for yourself what the article has to say. I'll go through it quickly. It's not a quick read, but we will get through it, and you can tell me, gang. You can tell me what your thoughts are about this, because I think it's an important perspective to hear during these times, just as I think it's important to hear how the Palestinians are living, right, during this conflict. I think both voices matter. Both voices have value. Both voices need to be heard. And we need, as people who aren't living in the conflict zone, right, to understand what is going on in that side of the world, right? It's a raw piece. They don't pull any punches, right? And we'll get to it. $5 from 𝕬𝖎. Also, begin counting down the days until Guernica goes bust. I give them 14 months at most, 6 months more likely. Well, I hope they don't, right? Again, I think that while they are cowards for pulling this, to be clear, giving in to the mob that was braying for them to cancel this person and to pull the article was cowardly for them to do it. I hope that I don't wish the magazine to go bust, right? I don't want it to go away. I think that it provides a platform that is very needed for both Palestinian and hopefully Israeli and Jewish voices as well. But let's get to the article. Hold on. And this is from the archives, right? So to be clear, you can't find this on the magazine. But here it is from the archives. Let me pull it up for us, my dear friends, my brothers and sisters. See, now you can't even see what it looks like. Okay, here we go. This is from the edges of the broken world. An Israeli translator tries to tread the line of empathy by Joanna Chen. Okay. There's a photo, but I can't see it because the archive system is kind of borked. Anyway, let's go through it. The tree lost its mythical powers. Horses huddled at the edge of the earth. The sniping light turned cold. Winter came. We continued, faces sealed. Only at night did we sit down with our own names. It was my Aunt Sheila who taught me the importance of reaching out to others, of lending a hand when needed. Widowed early, she was a feisty lady who helped out in hospitals and hospices in the coastal town of Blackpool where she lived. Auntie Sheila volunteered for years in the Citizens Advice Bureau, holding a warm and comforting hand out to 2 and 4 people of all denominations without question. She understood the intrinsic importance of person-to-person contact. She believed it was a two-way street, that she also benefited from it. But she also taught me that you cannot care for others if you do not care for yourself first. This is why she went swimming a couple of times a week and enjoyed quiz shows. This is why she allowed herself jelly beans and chocolate-coated figs, a stock of which she kept in her sideboard. As a child growing up in the north of England, I often stayed over at Auntie Sheila's house, which overlooked the local park. At night, when she tucked me up in bed, she would lean over and whisper in my ear, "You're my favorite, but don't go telling anyone." She whispered the same words to my brother, Andrew, and I'm sure we weren't the only ones convinced we were her favorites. When I was 16, My parents moved us to Israel following the death of my brother in a traffic accident. They wanted a fresh start, but the move was wrenching for me. Everything was strange and unfamiliar, even the language. Severed from my family back in the UK, I felt no connection to this land or the people around me. I struggled, and I learned to get by on my own. I immersed myself in grieving for my brother and for the life left behind. How can I mourn the distance of years, of waste of your silence seeping into the earth? So far, just giving some background, where she came from. One of her inspirations, someone that she drew on, right? Who influenced her childhood, right? Pretty standard stuff, okay? I don't think anyone at this point has any questions or could take offense, right? Give me a second. Let me check the chats. Make sure you guys are all doing good over there. It looks like you are. Looks like you guys are having fun. Good. Stick with us. We got some more reading to do, and we will get through it together, gang. Okay? But, yeah, this is important. Remember, this is the stuff that they wanted taken down, that they pressured, that people resigned over. This, right? And called Zionist apologia. Let's keep going, okay? When I turned 18, my mother, who thought that an enlistment in the Israeli military would help me assimilate, said, "We have the world's greatest army here." And I fired back immediately. "Who's we? Speak for yourself." I never served in the army. No one came to visit us except Auntie Sheila, who arrived twice a year carrying a suitcase stuffed with Lancashire cheese, frozen legs of lamb, and shortbread wrapped in rustling cellophane from the local market. She never failed to call on me on my birthday and on the anniversary of my brother's death. Her visits continued until she was in her 90s and no longer able to make the journey. "You hand me a clean handkerchief, ripe figs. I've been moving away for years." Again, she refused to serve in the IDF. She didn't enlist. She wasn't involved in that at all. And in fact, it looks like she was fairly against it, at least from the excerpt that she says, right? According to the story that she is telling, right? Which is based on her real life and real events. Okay, let's keep going. I struggled along, went to university, and eventually began working for Newsweek, which was when I started to take a real interest in my neighbors, Palestinians and Israelis. But journalism lulled me into the role of spectator, and I kept my distance, hid behind headlines. I was translating poems on the side from Hebrew and from Arabic. In that work, I found a different relationship to language. Translation shook me out of the apathy that had set in after countless failed peace processes. Literary translation not only demands that the words themselves be transformed from source to target language, it requires deep reading, attention to voice, to the nuances of language. At this level of attention, the surface of a voice is never smooth, but rather textured. It consolidates intonation, it fine-tunes inflection. If you look up voice in a dictionary, you will find it defined as a sound arising in the larynx and exiting through the mouth, and also as an opinion or attitude. In working with voice, at its many levels of meaning and texture, literary translation affords me a glimpse into other worlds. It is a creaking door held open to the reader for the length of a poem, the width of a piece of prose. It enables me to transcend borders and build literary bridges from source to target language, from one people to another. And it was a wake-up call for me. By the time the knock at the door came, I was dead. "Who's there?" asked the photo in the frame. "It is me," I said. "I came back to wipe the dust off you." She's a translator. She translated poetry. And she says that during this process, it kind of opened her eyes. It got her more interested in what was happening around her. It helped her become more involved, right? To take things more seriously, to come out of who she was, right? Her individualism, and to see the world as a whole. Cernus, hello, I missed the discourse. What's this? This is, apparently, we're reading something that was pulled from Guernica magazine by the cowards there, right? That they called Zionist apologia, that they thought was so beyond the pale that anyone publishing it was a monster, right? And we're reading it because fuck those people, literally. And I'm gonna expose my audience to this because I believe it's a voice that needs to be heard. So yes, let's go through and we'll continue and we'll see what can be seen. So again, this is her kind of setting the stage of who she is. And this is all, and to be clear, like, this is what this article is. It is a thought piece, not to give an opinion on the state of affairs, but to kind of explain their own part in all of this. And what I mean by part of all this, like, how it has affected them, how it has changed their life, how it has shown like new light into darkened areas, and how the October 7th events kind of sent everyone topsy-turvy. So again, we'll continue. Okay. A few years ago, inspired by my aunt, I began volunteering with Road to Recovery, a non-governmental organization founded by Yuval, whose brother was kidnapped and killed by Hamas in 1993. The organization transports Palestinian children in need of life-saving medical procedures to and from Israeli hospitals. Volunteers pick up the children, accompanied by parents or grandparents, from checkpoints around the West Bank, and, until October 7th, from the Erez checkpoint that leads to Gaza. I usually drive to the Tarkumia checkpoint, close to Hebron, a 15-minute journey from my house in the Ela Valley. Before this present war, I would pick up my passengers around 5:30 a.m., everything still shrouded in shadow when I left the house. As I approached the checkpoint on any weekday, I would see hundreds of men on foot clutching plastic bags of food and walking along to the spot where minibuses awaited them. Headed for work, they would cross over from the West Bank to Israel. Traffic was typically thick at that time of day. It would sometimes take me half an hour to crawl the last half mile to the actual checkpoint, where I would drive through to a parking lot monitored by Israeli soldiers. Sometimes it took a while for my passengers to get through the checkpoint, so I'd watch the sunrise stretching in a blaze of pink across the sky. Occasionally, flocks of birds flew over the checkpoint with ease and grace, offering a moment of pause for me. A few months ago, a muster of storks flew right above my car, their necks stretched out, wings flapping. But the last time I went there, which was before October 7th, it was early evening and the sun had already set. I picked up a mother and a toddler whom she carried in her arms. It was an emergency. We smiled briefly. I opened the car door for her, and together we strapped her frail son into the back seat. I handed him a bag of candy, and he held the bag in his fist, his tiny fingers curled around it. The mother sat with me in the front, occasionally turning around to check on her child, her face raw with fear. On many journeys like this, we spoke in broken Arabic, broken Hebrew, and English. These were simple sentences. How many children do you have? Where do you live? Would you like water? Sometimes we did not speak at all until the end of the journey, when we arrived at the entrance to the Pediatric ER of 𝕾𝖎𝖎 Medical Center in Tel Aviv. During the COVID pandemic, I drove with windows open, and we all wore masks. I was careful. So, again, this person is just giving a voice to their experience and talking about how it worked before October 7th, what she was involved in, how she interacted with Palestinians in the West Bank, right? How she saw the world, right? And how she tried to help those that in need. And again, you don't have to, you can say, right, that she wasn't doing enough, or that she was still a settler, or all these things. You can say that. That's fine. You don't have to agree with the point of view given in a piece of literature like this, or not technically literature, but in an essay like this. But remember, kids out there, I want you to remember, this was seen as bad enough to be taken down and for people to resign and quit their jobs over this. This is how this was seen. Let's keep going. We're about halfway through. We'll get through it. Don't worry. I told you it was a little longer, but I think, again, it's worth going through. Let me check the chats to see if everyone's doing good and see if anyone sent me money. I would like them to send me money. No money yet, but we will see. Yeah, like I said, this is a little longer. We're about halfway through. We'll get it. We'll get it. I know it's crazy. Oops, wrong button. Here we go. Okay. At 6:32 on the morning of October 7th, sirens filled the air and rockets began falling close to my village. The walls of the house reverberated again and again. I stood in the garden, surveying the spinach and lettuce in the vegetable plot, the lemon tree heavy with pale fruit. The thuds were sickening. I went inside, locking the door behind me. Muddled reports from the border with Gaza were streaming through social media. As the day wore on, my dread increased. There were many dead and injured. Hospitals were running short of blood. The next day, my husband, Roz, and I donated blood at a hospital in Jerusalem, waiting in line for 6 hours, along with hundreds of other people. As we stood there, we recalled giving blood at an East Jerusalem hospital back in 2014, during an Israeli military operation in Gaza. On that occasion, the blood was being sent to the people of Gaza. Back then, an Israeli friend of mine shook her head when I told her what we had done. "You should be giving blood to the Israeli soldiers, not the Palestinians," she admonished me. For 2 weeks after October 7th, I was unable to focus on my translation work. It felt disembodied, as if the poems I was working on were floating somewhere above my head, out of reach. They made no sense to me. I spent my time volunteering with an Israeli family from Wpath, bordering the Gaza Strip. Their daughter, son-in-law, and nephew had been murdered. Their house had been torched, and they were evacuated to my village, where they were temporarily living at the end of my street. Neighbors. I mopped their floor, did their dishes, washed their clothes. I heated up plates of food when they were hungry and hugged them when they looked like they needed it. What does a person look like when they need a hug? Like they are lost. It was the least I could do. My volunteer work with Road to Recovery came to a full stop. How could I continue after Hamas had massacred and kidnapped so many civilians, including Road to Recovery members, such as 𝕾𝖎𝖙, a longtime Canadian peace activist? And I admit, I was afraid for my own life. Again, this is her just recounting her experience, how it changed her, the devastation she felt, how she felt so disconnected from the work that had initially began making her care, right, about the situation around her, that had opened her up, how the October 7th attacks impacted her, changed her way of life, and made her, again, fear for her own life. It felt, again, this is an impact piece. It talks about her own experience, her own impact, how her life was changed. This isn't apologia. This is just what someone was feeling after a fucking tragedy. I phoned friends to find out how they were doing. Some had sons serving in the army in the South. Others were struggling to keep going. A neighbor told me she was trying to calm her children, who were frightened by the sound of warplanes flying over the house day and night. I tell them these are good booms. She grimaced, and I understood the subtext, that the Israeli army was bombing Gaza. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in this because I want to highlight this paragraph right here. The one about phoning friends that I just read, okay? When I was looking on Twitter, I know. This was the most commonly paragraph cited to show how this was a terrible piece that should never be published and how this was apologia for genocide. Specifically the line of, "I tell them these are good booms." Now, I want to be very clear. I don't want you to misunderstand me. If you think that line is genocide apologia, you are retarded. You are sub-IQ. You need medical and professional help in order to get through the day. You should not be allowed to take care of yourself because you are incapable of taking care of yourself, right? Your mental faculties are so very low that you need medication and constant care to make sure that you don't burn your hand on a stove because that is the level of childish, cognitive rigor that we are dealing with here. What this paragraph shows is how the author was talking to her friends and acquaintances about what had just happened. Again, 2 weeks ago, it looks like the timeline shows in the story. And one of her neighbors is talking about how her kids were super scared because the explosions that they kept hearing might have reminded them of the booms that they heard 2 weeks before on October 7th when Hamas was going house to house, throwing grenades in them and killing people. And so, in order to make sure her kids did not feel like they were going to be murdered, right? She said, don't worry, these are good booms. This wasn't a apologia for what was happening in Gaza or the attacks of IDF onto Hamas into the Gazan Strip. What this was a mother trying to comfort her children, her frightened children who had just lived through a fucking massacre. You can go fuck yourself if you think this is genocidal apologia. Seriously. Go fuck yourself. I mean it. You are either retarded or you are evil. Your moral compass is broken and you probably deserve whatever you get coming to you. Okay. Let's keep going. Just want to put that pin in there. Okay, an old friend from the UK called me while I was running an errand. Hello, my love, she bubbled in her broad North Yorkshire accent. And these last two words seared through me, stirring a pain of longing for the rough, gray landscape of my childhood, the openness of it all. I'm okay, I answered after a pause, my voice cracking. And I wished I were not there among people who use pronouns like us and them and ours and theirs. I texted Nua, a Palestinian fixer who had worked alongside me at Newsweek for years. I'd been a guest at her home in Ramallah. We'd broken bread together. We traveled together through the occupied territories and had drunk peppermint tea at the American Colony Hotel in East Jerusalem. Nuha, how are you, my friend? I wrote, half expecting her not to respond. But she did, immediately. Sad, sad, she texted back. We're all devastated in this unjust world. I felt encouraged that we could still talk, but a few minutes later she wrote me this. Ministry of Health, the water well and oxygen station in Al-Shifa Medical Complex were targeted. Dogs eat corpses dumped in a Shifa compound. The complex is subjected to continuous targeting. I didn't know how to respond. Beyond terrible, I finally wrote, knowing our conversation was over. I felt inexplicably ashamed, as if she were pointing a finger at me. I also felt stupid. This was war, and whether I liked it or not, Nuha and I were standing at opposite ends of the very bridge I hoped to cross. I had been naive. This conflict was bigger than the both of us. Beyond terrible was inadequate. I was inadequate. A door had been slammed in my face, politely but firmly. I neither wrote to the two poets I know in Gaza, nor posted anything on social media about them. One of them didn't post for days and days. Was he dead? Had he been detained by Hamas for his ties to an Israeli, or arrested by the Israeli military for his ties to Hamas? I had no idea. I've never met them in person. The conflict has seen to that. But I've translated and edited several of their poems. Their voices are important ones, and I want the English-speaking world to listen to them as much as I want the world to listen to the voices I translate from Hebrew. Now, however, I'm afraid to get them in trouble. A text message or an email from Israel might be incriminating. Hamas might intercept it, who knows? And I wonder if they would even answer me. My own heart was in turmoil. It was not easy to tread the lines of empathy, to feel passion for both sides. But as the days went by, the shock turned into a dull pain in my heart and a heaviness in my legs. At night, I lay in bed on my back in the dark, listening to rain against the window. I wondered if the Israeli hostages underground, the children and women, had any way of knowing the weather had turned cold. And I thought of the people of Gaza, the children and women, huddled inside tents supplied by the UN, or looking for shelter. I stared up at the ceiling and imagined it moving closer and closer toward me. Not falling or collapsing, but moving, like an elevator descended into the ground. The horrors that had been perpetrated rose to the surface of my consciousness at these times. I listened to the interviews with survivors. I watched videos of atrocities committed by Hamas in southern Israel and reports about the rising number of innocent civilians killed and devastated by Gaza. In Gaza, I'm sorry, killed in a devastated Gaza. My apologies. There is a limit to which the human soul can stomach atrocities and keep going. On the other hand, turning away from the distressing footage taken by Hamas terrorists, by surveillance cameras, and by people running for their lives or sheltering from missiles meant turning away from their pain. And I couldn't do it. Instead, I limited my intake of the news and joined a number of solidarity groups, Zoom meetings in which people shared their dismay and shock. But they were mostly Israelis, and much of the talk centered on their own side. One woman expressed anger that Palestinians she knew through her volunteer work had not reached out on October 7th to ask how she was, whether her family was safe. I shrugged inwardly at this sentiment. The Palestinians in the West Bank were struggling with their own problems. Closure, the inability to work, the threat of wide-scale arrests being made by the Israeli army, and harassment by sellers. No one was safe. A few years earlier, I had joined a course coordinated by the Parents Circle in which Israelis and Palestinians met for 3 months to learn each other's narratives. The course entailed not only conversing with each other, but also making field trips to learn the history of the Palestinians and the Jews. We went on a tour of Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial and Museum in Jerusalem. We also went to 𝕾𝖍𝖎, a Palestinian village whose residents were forced to leave their homes in 1948. We had time to talk together during 2 intensive weekends at the Everest Hotel in 𝕵𝖎𝖎. We learned the importance of acknowledging both the Israeli and Palestinian narratives, the importance of understanding the pain of each side. But still, after 3 months, I left with a feeling of pessimism. Felt like a small drop in a very large ocean of mistrust. In the WhatsApp group, we continued to talk, but there was always an undercurrent of suspicion. The Israelis talked about the Holocaust, about how the Jewish state was the only place they had. The Palestinians insisted that the Jewish state existed at their expense. There was goodwill, but not enough to straddle the chasm that divided us. Again, we're gonna pause here. There's a little bit left. We're almost done. Don't worry. But gang, this is what they hated. This is what they hated so much that they sent what could only be described as a hate mob after the publishers at Guernica. And people at Guernica resigned in protest over this. This is a fucking thoughtful piece of someone who lives in the region and is affected by the conflict, who has people she knows on both sides of things, who is looking into the world from both sides. The perspective of both the Israeli and the Palestinian are important here. When we talk about paths to peace, when we talk about ways to end this hate and this cycle of conflict, the only way we are going to be able to do that is if we listen. And to retract this kind of thing, right? To retract this perspective and insist that if you share this perspective, you are a genocide apologist, is only going to make the conflict infinitely worse and extend it into forever until one side or the other no longer exists to have a voice. And my God, I will prevent that at all costs. And I know my platform is small here. I know I am a little voice, but if it takes me reading all these goddamn articles that they try to censor, I will absolutely do that. I hate it. I hate it. I hate this idea that we cannot. Why should someone who lives in Israel, who has been through all of this, who wants to have their voice heard, apologize for existing? And I can hear some of you right now saying, oh, Wick, if this was from the perspective of a Hamas member in Palestine, you wouldn't want it shared or talked about, and you would be calling, you would be casting aspersions at those who published it and elevated this voices. Shut the fuck up. No, I wouldn't. I would be. Look, I can I am very interested in the Hamas perspective, and from the rank and file, especially for those who live in Palestine, who grew up in Palestine, in the West Bank and Gaza, even if they were a member of Hamas, and even if they engage in horrific acts. Because guess what, gang? Understanding does not mean condoning. I can condemn their actions. I can condemn what they did. But it is necessary that we understand who they are and how they come to be and how they think. And the only way we get to do that is by listening to their voices. And once again, Joanna Chen did not serve in the IDF. She volunteered to help Palestinian children. She spent her days doing that, right? She donated blood to Gazans. This isn't something like, I'm sure they could have done more. I'm sure they're not perfect. None of us are, right? But this isn't some Zionist. Okay, let's keep going. Two weeks after the present war began, I took the plunge and began driving children to hospitals. My grown-up children were against this, but I was determined to go. The night before my first drive since the war started, my husband and I decided he would accompany me just in case. My son scoffed at this. "Go on your own if you must," he said wryly. "If anything happens, we don't want to lose both our parents." We woke up at 5 a.m., made coffee, and waited for the coordinator to give me the go-ahead. The rules had changed. Instead of waiting for them in the parking lot of 𝕵𝖎, I was instructed to leave the house only when my passengers had gotten through security. At 6:30, I got the call and we drove in silence to 𝕵𝖎. The road leading to the checkpoint was deserted. Since October 7th, Palestinians had been forbidden to leave the West Bank for work in Israel. We arrived at the parking lot and I got out of the car. A small boy with a shock of black hair and his father were waiting at the other side of the parking lot. I hesitated as a soldier came up to me, and I fumbled for my driver's license and the details of my passengers sent to me earlier. 𝕻𝖎, age 3, accompanied by his father. Suddenly, the little boy waved to me from across the way, and I waved back as they walked over to my car. The father spoke a little Hebrew. We introduced ourselves, quickly strapped 𝕻𝖎 into the booster, and drove away. 10 minutes later, I dropped my husband off at the junction below my house. I felt safe. I was doing the right thing. This boy deserves medical treatment. He is not part of a war, I thought. On his first journey, I focused on only the job at hand, to get 𝕻𝖎 to the hospital. An hour later, I said goodbye to them outside the pediatric unit of 𝕍𝖎 Medical Center. While the father busied himself removing an overnight case from the truck in my car, I unbuckled 𝕻𝖎 from the booster and he held out his arms and smiled up at me. Shukran, thank you, the father said as I cradled 𝕻𝖎 in my arms for a moment. And I wanted to say, no, thank you for trusting me with your child. Thank you for reminding me that we can still find empathy and love in this broken world. I followed them with my eyes as they disappeared behind the glass doors of the hospital. And then I switched the radio on. Since then, I have made several more journeys to and from 𝕵𝖎. I spent one night editing a website created by a family whose daughter was murdered. I'm working on a translation of short stories from an anthology in English, Arabic, and Hebrew that will be published later this year. I translate each word, each phrase, carefully. I listen for the voices. I finally called Nua, and she answered the phone right away. We spoke for a few minutes about our kids and work and the whole situation. Hearing her warm, gravelly tones gave me hope. I'm going through a process, she said. We both are. I think of my Auntie Sheila a lot. How she taught me to reach out to neighbors near and far. How there is more to life than my own backyard. There is a very long way to go, but of one thing I am sure. Recovery begins now at home. That's it. That's it, gang. That's the Zionist genocidal apologia that had to be taken down at all costs, where people resigned from their jobs because it was so disgusting to them to share that perspective. That's it. What monsters? What fucking monsters that author was. Holy shit. I'm laughing because it's ridiculous. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Guernica magazine, you are cowards. You are cowards for unpublishing this. How dare you? Giving in to that kind of hate, to that depersoning, that dehumanizing of voices that don't scream your propaganda. You are cowards. Shame on you. You don't have to like or agree with this perspective. You can have substantive criticisms for this perspective. That's fine, right? You can call her charity work performative. Not enough. Not useful. That's fair. I disagree, but fair enough, right? You can say that, well, Palestinian voices need to be centered too. Absolutely, right? Guernica magazine, to their credit, right, does a lot of that. We can look at their website right now, right? Actually, let me bring it up. This is them. Oh, yeah, I gotta adjust the size. One day I'll figure out a better way to do this, right? Yeah, this is them. Guernica, 15 years, global arson politics. They have different articles from different voices, right? They do some, again, it's pretty pretty good stuff. Again, here's a Palestinian voice right here from Good Morning, from 𝕾𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. Good morning, Palestine. You know, again, this is something I Ghost by 𝕾𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, about how the West doesn't give a shit about him, etc. Again, this otherwise thoughtful magazine, okay? And that's why I'm frustrated. That's a large part of why I'm frustrated, in fact. Because these voices are important. And we can't just hear from one side. If we just hear, like, you need to get this conflict. It's hurting everyone. Yes, Gaza's suffering way more right now than Israel is. Absolutely. Can't pretend it's otherwise. But to act as if October 7th didn't happen and that there was no kind of impact on the survivors there, and on those who dealt with life in Israel, to act as if it's all hunky-dory is wrong. This dehumanization that has happening right now, and I use that term very purposefully. There are, again, in order to free Palestine, some people have decided, some activists have decided that Zionists, Israelis, must be dehumanized. They must be treated as non-people. Their voices cannot be heard. And in fact, if you share their voice, you are a Zionist enabler. That what you are doing is you are centering the voice of the oppressor over the voice of the oppressed. That therefore, the oppressor must be treated with disdain, and unless they denounce and apologize for their own existence and denounce the country in which they're from in full-throated terms, they cannot be heard. And again, even if you just share their voice, even if you just platform them or publish them, you are complicit, and you are also a genocide enabler. And I think that this way of thinking is harmful, it is cowardly, it is cancerous, and it is going to lead to the destruction of that region in a very real sense. Can we get a blood libel scream, Wick? Maybe later. Maybe if you give me some money. Okay. You guys want to read some of the comments on the Twitter? You guys want to get mad with me? You want to read some of these Twitter comments that they made about this? Let's go look. Let's go see. And this is the I'm going to get us to the original post that was made, okay? Give me a second. We'll get there. A moment. Man, I wish it was easier to just here. Okay, here we go. Can you guys see that? Here, let me adjust it for you. Center it a little more. Why do I got all these notifications? I'm not gonna click on those notifications. I'm curious why they're all there. I only made one post today, maybe two. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's beside the point. So this is original. On March 8th, this is what they posted from Guernica magazine. They linked the essay from the Edges of the Broken World, which we just read together. Okay. These are the kinds of comments that were immediately made on this. Okay, we'll get to the quote tweets too. 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 genocide is beyond the pale. And remember, we just read this. Did you guys see any 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 of genocide? Did you see any of that? Any? I didn't. I find open warmongering less nauseating than this sort of self-pitying, faux bleeding heart claptrap. The fascist propagandist is at least honest. The liberal propagandist never shuts up about how tormented they are by the terrible complexity of it all. Get over yourself. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Okay. I guess if you want to side with fascists over 𝕾𝖎𝖙, who made the most fucking milquetoast essay in existence about how she felt after the October 7th massacre, right? Tragedy. I don't know what you want to call it, right? This one's a good post. Here's the archive. You can see that 𝕾𝖎𝖙 declined to serve in the IDF, volunteered to drive Palestinian children to hospitals, donated blood for Gaza in 2014, had complex feelings about the war, and this is beyond the pale. Really? That echoes my sentiment. What a horrific thing to write and publish. And again, it quotes the paragraph about the good booms. Horrific, gang. Horrific. So what I'm getting from this, she's a settler who has settler genocidal friends and raised settler genocidal children, and gets uncomfortable when that's pointed out to her. My God, gang, I'm gonna go crazy. I'm going crazy. I am going insane. What is this nonsense? I am looking at the sky and seeing it's blue, and you're telling me, no, that's a fucking hellish reddish orange. You're fucking nuts. I used to respect you, Guernica Mag. This is shameful choice y'all made to center this. Not even well-written narrative. Oh, God. Can the Guernica editors read, or are they okay with this kind of villainizing of Palestinians? How could I continue, this author writes about the charity work she thinks makes up for the fact that she's a settler. Prefacing it with generic musings on lit translation was the cherry on top. Villainizing of Palestinians? We just read this. I've read this 3 times now. No Palestinian was villainized. Yeah, she didn't like Hamas, and she called out Hamas as fucking terrorists. Good. But this talks about her friendships with Palestinians, working with Palestinians, helping Palestinians, doing fuck all more than any of these slacktivists ever have. And this is what infuriates me. Look, you can say what she's doing isn't enough or it's performative or whatever, but what she is doing, what she did by both donating blood and driving children, kids as young as 3, to hospitals to get life-saving medical treatment, what she is doing is having a measurable impact on the world that is measurably good. And what you're doing is you're sitting on your chair in your fucking couch, surrounded by your bonbons, munching, shouting Free Palestine on Twitter, while people will burn around you and doing nothing to stop it. Literally nothing. The Palestinians will curse your name, right? In the coming years. Curse your name because you had a chance to do something and you decided to do this, to do not worse than nothing, to turn the cause into a joke, to turn the hashtag Free Palestine into a hashtag, right? Into this thing of mockery and derision, right? You didn't work to free them. You've done fucking nothing. I can't do it anymore. We're gonna stop. I'm getting mad again. $5 from Zoo. Thanks for reading. Hey, thanks for the $5. Again, you can say that this piece was in poor taste. You cannot like it. All good. But apologia, Zionism, villainizing Palestinians, none of that happened. You don't have to make shit up. Fuck, I'm mad, gang. I'm upset. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe this was a mistake. Because I have a whole other segment I want to get to. But god damn, this is on my mind now. Oh, I hate it. Why can't we just... Art? Let's talk about art for a moment. Literature for a moment, okay? Back in my day, right? And I know I'm a little older than some of you young whippersnappers in the chat, okay? But in my day, art was supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, right? Good art made you feel ill at ease, right? It challenged you. It challenged your beliefs. Nowadays, you have young people, right, quoting the rules at you if you try to make a uncomfortable art piece or challenge people's preconceptions. They wag their fingers and talk about how you shouldn't do that. That's not okay. You're making people feel uncomfortable. What is going on? Good art, great art, makes you feel uncomfortable and challenges your worldview. If your worldview can't handle a fucking essay, then if a well-written essay destroys your worldview deserves to be destroyed. Simple as. If your worldview cannot handle a fucking essay by an Israeli translator who didn't serve in the IDF, who helped Palestinian children and donated blood to Gaza, then your worldview is dog shit and deserves to die. What? What are we doing here, gang? What are we even doing here? We are never going to get past this conflict, and we desperately need to. Nothing is ever going to get better if we cannot even listen to what the other fucking side has to say. So not even the other fucking side, right? This person doesn't seem pro fucking war. This person seems like they hate and have complex feelings about the whole situation, right? If we cannot listen to someone who lives in Israel about their thoughts and feelings on how their life was changed after October 7th, we are destined for eternal conflict, or at least conflict until one side or the other is completely eradicated. And my God, it's not going to be the Israeli side with the way things are going, right? If we want any hope of a free Palestine, of a free, liberated, safe Palestinian people, which I do desperately, we need to start listening to people who are wanting to work with us, who are wanting to make life a better place, right? For everyone. As many people as possible. And if you can't stand the fact that a translator who lives in Israel has complex feelings after people they know got killed and murdered on October 7th, right? Then I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you don't hate Zionists. Maybe you hate something else. And maybe you need to really look into your feelings and deal with maybe what you're going through. I hate this. I hate this idea, right? That now anti-Semites can use Zionism as a shield, right? And just say, well, I'm not against Jewish people. I'm just against Zionists. And come on, gang. We know you're gay. We know that's a mask in a lot of cases. Not all, obviously, right? There are plenty of criticisms I have for that kind of Zionism. But, yo, gang, if you start saying, well, now I don't believe in the Holocaust anymore, you're not that kind of, that's not critical of Zionism, brother or sister. That ain't what that is. God damn. Oh my God. Oh. What thoughts do you have, my dear viewers, my dear audience? What are some of your thoughts? Oh, you guys want me to yell blood libel? Blood libel! There you go. There's a good blood libel yell. No one's blood libeled yet today that I've seen. But I'm always on the lookout for it, gang. I'm always on the lookout. I'm forever vigilant. I'm forever vigilant. I'm going crazy. Like, this kind of censorship, right? Like, we all got mad, and I got mad when they censor pro-Palestinian voices on campus, right? When you have protests and otherwise peaceful assemblies from pro-Palestinian voices, and people try to shut it down, right? People try to get it canceled and things like that. That's wrong. That's not something we should do. It's something we should fight against. People are gonna might get mad at me for saying this, but in Canada recently, there was protests against one of the synagogues there. There was protest. I believe it was a synagogue. And pro-Palestinians voices came to protest at the synagogue, and people were like, "Oh, that's inappropriate," and things like that. It's not ideal, but I think those protests should be allowed. I think it should be legal. I think you should be able to protest at a synagogue, outside of a mosque, outside of a synagogue, outside of a temple, outside of a church, outside of anywhere, right? Like, I don't think we should be shutting those voices down. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, but that's a place of worship. Soy. I don't, look, First Amendment rights over their right to have their voice heard and protest. Again, as long as they're not like breaking in, right? Or like smashing the windows and things like that, they should be able to be outside and protest. I think that's okay, right? Even funerals, gang. Even funerals. I believe in the First Amendment. I think that the right to free speech is important. But if you're mad at the people who are trying to cancel or trying to shut down the protests in front of the synagogue, and then you go online and you try to get a magazine canceled for publishing an essay, the most milquetoast in existence, about a woman who is struggling with her life, right, after October 7th and has complex feelings about everything that's going on, go fuck yourself. You don't believe in free speech. You don't. And you can go fuck yourself. Okay. Pause, gang. Vibe shift. Vibe change. Yeah, short stack goblin, Canada. When I say First Amendment, I mean free speech. I get you. I understand they don't have the First Amendment. That's why Canada is always going to be inferior. I get it. Hopefully one day they will. Fair enough. When I say First Amendment, I mean free speech. The right of free speech. That should be everywhere. I don't care where you live. You should have this right. That is my advocacy, and that is what I would like to see happen, a global change throughout the world. I understand that in many countries that is not the case, but that's what makes those countries, or part of what makes those countries, bad, and what makes my country good. So there you go. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have a vibe shift now, gang. We're gonna change topics. We are going to shift gears a little bit. Okay. Again, this was something I went early for because it was important for me to get it out. It was important for me to address it because otherwise I would go literally insane. But I did have some interesting, and I hope you'll stick with me, right? Because it is an interesting topic today. We're going to have a new segment called Allison Explains. Allie Explains. It's going to be a semi-regular segment where my friend Allison comes on and talks to me and explains a concept to me that she has autistically researched. The horseradish is rating with a party of 10. Thank you, horseradish. Welcome to the stream. You're just in time. We have finished one segment and we are going on to the other. Let me bring in my new voice. Gang, check out the horseradish. Let me shout you out real quick. The horseradish. Boom. Give him a follow if you're following me on Twitch or Twitter. And gang, I guess before we bring Allison on, let me take a moment to say, if you've liked this content, if you've enjoyed what I had to say, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button. All these helps. Throw subs, bits, money, super chats. All these things are good. Thank you. Okay, next topic. Let me bring on Allison. Allison, get backstage. Oh, she's trying to log into desktop. Oh, so we might have a moment, okay? Give me a second. Give me a second. Allison is getting ready. I thought she was ready. I was like, oh man, I'm making her wait. I don't want to be late again and have you all yell at me for being 10 minutes late to something. But no, she's not even ready yet. So hopefully she gets ready soon. We got some great stuff coming up this weekend. All week we got some banger content coming up, okay? Tomorrow we have Short Fat Otaku is coming on. Dev's coming on. We got Brianna Wu. We got Tachyon Blue. We got 𝕾𝖎𝖙. And we're going to talk about the Sweet Baby Ink stuff because that's been a mind fuck as well. You guys heard about the Sweet Baby Ink stuff? I didn't know anything about it until very recently. And I saw it and I DM'd Dev and I was like, can you explain this to me? Like, give me a TLDR. And like for the next hour, my DMs just blew up with all this information. I've since looked into it. I've since investigated it. We've got through several articles that have been published. Kotaku, The Guardian, there's a few other publications I read. And then seeing what was said on Twitter and then looking into the event itself, gang, we are on the verge. We are on a verge, I think, of Gamergate 2. Okay, it's coming. It's coming. I wasn't here or around for Gamergate 1. But from everything everyone said about it, right? There's a lot of very similar veins of behavior that are happening here. But we're going to talk about it tomorrow. That's going to be tomorrow's content. Wednesday, we're having Hutch on. Yeah, that Hutch. We're having Rob Knorr on. We're having Josiah from Pondering Politics on, right? We're having Admiral Gibbs, Lauren De Laguna, Rashad Crenshaw. And we're going to be talking about whether or not Trump has been good for the Republican Party, has been a positive or a negative. So tune in for that. That's going to be great. But Allison is here. I can stop stalling. We can get him on. We can get her on, and we can talk about the Wpath leaks. What is that? We're going to find out together in the new segment, Allison Explains. Hello, hello, hello. You're live.
Hello. Here, wait. Am I?
Yeah. Take a moment. Get your camera on. See what we got. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome.
How are you?
Oh well. Did you see my last
the camera's here.
segment?
Normally it's here, so I was like looking here, but also you're here. Let me try to. Okay. Is that better? No, it's not.
I don't know.
It
You look
bothers
fine
me
on
that
my
I'm.
end.
Okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello.
Hi. So how am I? I don't know. Did you see the last segment I did? Did you watch any of that?
I did see some of it. I saw some of it. I read that article. I don't know anything about the magazine. Like, I don't know how. I don't know, but it seemed like really unoffensive and pretty obviously insane that it got erased.
Yeah. I got a little heated. You're getting heated wick today, Allison. Okay. Well, I don't know if you could even hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, no, I could hear you.
Oh
I could
yeah.
still hear you.
Fair enough. Yeah, we're getting heat. You're getting heated wick today because goddamn, um, it really rustled my jimmies. But I'm glad you're here because you've been DMing me for a while about this, right? And you've been
Yes.
eager, chomping at the bit, one might say, to come in and talk to me about this. Now, for my audience, can you explain what WPath even is? What are these leaks? Can you kind of give just like a general overview of what the fuck we're even talking about today? Go ahead.
Yeah, so WPATH stands for the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and it used to be called the Harry Benjamin International Gender Dysphoria Association, and they legally changed their name in 2007. So there's been only two WPATH standards of care because their legal name has only been WPATH since they released those two. But the organization itself has released 8 standards of care starting in 1979, with the most recent version being published in 2002. And it's just a really like influential medical professional society, basically comprised of USPath, the U.S. Professional Association for Transgender Health, and 𝕃path, the European Association for Transgender or Professional Association for Transgender Health. WPath is those two together. And like WPATH clinicians are explicitly cited in, say, like the Endocrine Society, like presentation of their transgender guidelines, and like the American Academy of Pediatrics shouts out WPATH. There is a like an amicus brief filed in a case where the ACLU is suing a state that prohibited biomedical transition for minors, and WPATH is a signee, like a professional society that certified the brief, along with like 20 American professional societies. So there is a criticism often levied at quote unquote WPATH that like it's actually just US Path. They've lost a shit ton of influence in Europe, and it's actually just like transgender activists, like in America, clinicians in America pretending that it's a way more international association than what it is. Okay. But regardless, they are influential. They are cited in court as being like the medical authority for people suffering
Okay.
from gender dysphoria.
So they're someone that has sway, influence, that they have been involved in how medical care operates in the US at least. I can't speak for Europe, but in the
You'll
US at least.
regularly
Oh, go on.
you will regularly see like therapists or clinicians that specialize in gender identity say that they are a WPATH member, and that's kind of like a way to signify that they're like trans friendly
Okay,
or like LGBT.
is this and this is a good question from the audience here. Are they a government institution or is this a private body?
It's a 501c3. So it's like
You're
a
gonna have
yeah,
to translate that for us, okay?
it's a private organization. It's a private organization, and it's like a interdisciplinary. So it's not just medical professionals. Okay, their medical guidelines are what gets super famous, and everybody cares about them because allegedly they're the reason why a lot of detransitioners cannot have remedies in medical malpractice law, even when they were like allegedly not good candidates for the treatment to begin with. Allegedly, these standards of care are written to protect clinicians as much as possible who are performing like very, very highly experimental stuff on like super vulnerable patients. Allegedly. Okay.
Allegedly. Okay, what are some
Yeah.
of the so okay, so what we got is an organization influential in the medical field. Several physicians say that they're members of WPATH to symbol trans friendliness. They've been involved in trans discourse. They've been involved in legislation, and lawsuits. So influence. way up there. Got you. Um, so what happened recently? Like, what's when people talk about the WPath leaks? What the hell what are we talking about? What is this? Right?
So, do you know who Michael Schellenberger is?
I do, I do not. Well, I'm cheating because I kind of do because I read the like fucking 34 pages of notes you sent me. But for my audience, explain, please.
Yeah, so Michael Schellenberger is like a policy think tank guy that's basically been involved in various charity activism situations since he was young. And he used to be much more to the left than he is now. So he's still like solidly like liberal, but I mean, he basically, so he started off with environmentalism and he realized, like, oh man, the best way to solve climate change is nuclear energy. And like a lot of the climate change hysteria that you see amongst young people, it's not actually like seemingly motivated by concern for the environment because they don't have reasoned policy solutions or anything. They're just very upset. And it's like clearly this is attracting a lot of like highly emotional people. So it's the first time he kind of ruffled some feathers because there were people that accused him of being an industry plant, like, oh, you're just like an old school environmentalist that got like bought off by nuclear and now you're shitting on us. People said that about him. Then he came out with a book called San Francisco: How Progressive Policies Ruin Cities. And he's critiquing harm reduction policies and drug addiction. And he's saying, hey, how those injection sites in San Francisco going? You got fentanyl addicts dying in the street everywhere. That's how it's going. So that's like, I mean, a really big simplification. But his book, he's like, I've dealt with seriously mentally ill people and drug addicts and homeless people forever. And this hard lefty harm reduction, you know, give them everything and expect nothing, it doesn't fucking work. So he ruffled more feathers then. Then he dropped part of the Twitter files, if you remember that
I
whole saga.
I remember that, but this is where we're getting to something I've actually looked into because I haven't read San Francisco. I'm not sure of this guy's past history, but I do know the Twitter files, right? The Twitter
Honestly,
files didn't really I'm not impressed. Let's say that.
the
I'm not
only
impressed.
reason why I'm mentioning all these things is not even to point to like his specific work, right? It's you don't have to agree with any of his takes or any of his past stuff. The only reason I went through his stuff is to illustrate this guy is literally not a gender identity activist. He's going to get painted as like an anti-trans activist and it's like he's just got nothing in his record to think that he particularly cares that much about gender identity stuff. You know what I mean? Again, you don't have to agree with him, but it seems like he claims that he is a person who got these leaks and he felt morally compelled to drop them and people can make decisions about them of what they will, but it's internal like forum posts on a site called Doc Matter or a forum or software called Doc Matter, which is like a HIPAA compliant allegedly platform where professionals can like speak to each other and it brands itself as like we're trying to reduce medical error by allowing physicians to talk about what works and what doesn't. So this is where these came from is the software called Doc Matter, the WPath
Okay,
forum.
how did he get them? Right? So he says he got these somehow. Does he explain how?
I mean, it's implied that a person in WPath broke the law and sent it to him. But he says, listen, we're governed by the Pentagon Papers principles. I can publish shit that was obtained illegally if I didn't encourage anybody to break the law. And he's like, I did not encourage a single motherfucker to break the law. It just dropped in my lap. Okay. So people probably broke the law, and it's going to be like people are probably going to maybe try to get some sources. Like it's been implied that WPath's going to try to sue, figure out who the mole is. Basically, this has happened before. There have been like anonymous people in WPath come out before and say, I'm worried that activism is like too influential in the like it's happened before. There has been dissent within the WPath ranks previously, but like it is seemingly illegal that they screenshotted all this shit and sent it over. But it
Okay.
is like
But it's
it
covered
is
under the Pentagon Papers principle, which says that if you
the
retrieve,
publisher.
if the
Yes.
publisher receives information but did not solicit that information in a way that would break the law, right? They're allowed to publish it. They're allowed to share it and not face any kind of charges or pushback. I'm assuming this applies civilly as well. Is that correct?
Um I don't know, honestly.
Fair enough.
I think it might just be a First Amendment,
Fair enough. So at least we
and like
know
protection of sources things. Like
criminally they
I
can't be
don't think.
prosecuted. Okay.
Yeah, no, but I mean, civilly, like I don't think that he can be held in civil contempt for refusing to say. I mean, it's edgy, but like I don't. I would want to brush up on this
Yeah, I
before
don't
I
know.
like said stuff.
Maybe
But
Lactoid's in the audience and he can tell us, but
yeah, at lactoid.
well, we can gang, if you know Lactoid, just DM him and ask him about the Pentagon's Papers principle. We might need his expertise here soon. But beside the point. So, WPATH organization, super influential, involved in medical care for minors when it comes to trans and gender stuff, right?
I mean,
They're
all of them.
Yep, they're involved.
Minors, adults, all of them.
Sure. They're involved in legislation. They're involved in lawsuits. They're involved in medical common practices, things like that. So influential. There's a website where they discuss. It's protected. However, this individual gets wind of this. They receive this information, then they publish this information. Why did they publish this information? What is this information? Tell us about it. What are we looking at here?
Well, Michael Schellenberger is of the stated opinion that these leaks are deeply unflattering for WPATH. So it's mostly posts, it's mostly forum posts, people speaking back and forth to each other. A lot of names redacted, but surgeons' names are not redacted, and like the hotshot PhDs that are constantly in the news arguing for this are not redacted. But a lot of the like lower level like nurses and shit, like they redacted them. Um, but it's also a video transcript and a video from a panel that 90 seconds of it went viral a year ago, and they dropped 90 minutes of it in the WPATH files. But would you rather me give you I honestly think that the text stuff and the video is like kind of better handled. Which one do you want me to talk about first?
So which do you think is more? What's the juiciest bits?
Okay, so I mean, I think that like
Because we're talking about leaks, so they're talking medical stuff. Like, why does that matter, right? We already know this is controversial, but what is said, what is leaked, that is something that the average American should be like take note of, right?
um okay, and I genuinely do not understand how people are allowed to assert that puberty blockers are reversible in this context. I genuinely looking at this, like we have which we've had for a year now, and we've had the WPATH president on video saying that of all natal male children blocked at Tanner stage 2, which is what the WPATH SOC 8 that was just released in 2022 after this video was published, by the way. WPATH SOC 8 describes puberty blockade as soon as puberty begins as a fully reversible intervention. And we have the WPATH president, we already had this person on film, but we also have them in writing saying 0 gender dysphoric males blocked at Tanner stage 2 have been able to reach orgasm as adults. Okay. And this is a person named Marcy Bowers, who considers themselves to be like one of the most prolific vaginoplasty surgeons like in the world. Okay. And they operated on Jazz Jennings the first time. And
So say
it's
that again.
crazy.
Hold. So you have the WPATH president saying
Do you
on
want me to
record.
send you the video clip and then you can just play it
Yes,
and we can
please
vibe
do.
out?
Please, actually, can you share your screen of it? And I'll give you
Here, wait.
permission. Hold on.
So I'm on my boyfriend's desktop and then
Oh,
my shit is
okay.
on my laptop.
Sure. DM
So
it
I
to
could
me. DM
probably,
it to me.
okay.
And you may not be able to hear it, but I have a way for us to hear it. Okay. So if you
Here.
DM me the video, I'll pull it up and we will listen and watch it together. So them saying this, why is this scandalous though, right? All right, is it contradictory to something they said publicly?
I mean, a life okay, they call it a harmless pause, and it's like, well, it sounds like it's developmentally stunting a person at like a crucial like sexual developmental window and then resulting in permanent, we knew sterility already, but also anorgasmia. Like that doesn't sound like a harmless pause or reversible. Also, but the reversible stuff has been sketchy anyways, because which first of all, the W path, whenever they say fully reversible, there's no footnotes. And by the way, I'm going to send you This is just
Yeah, send me the video and we can watch the video. The 90-second clip, not the 90-minute clip, to be
yeah,
clear.
no,
I don't
no,
want
no,
the
no, no,
90
no.
minutes. I want the 90
This is
seconds.
this is not from the video that's in the WPath files. This is a video of 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜 at like a trans healthcare symposium that was hosted on Zoom by Duke University. Okay. And then this is people freaking the fuck out about it on Twitter, which happened after it happened because people were like, whoa, the president of WPath just said that none of these boys that get puberty blocked can orgasm when they grow up, which makes perfect sense. Like, I don't know why, if you were chemically castrated, like as soon as you started sexually developing, and then you were estrogenized, and they admit that causes permanent genital atrophy immediately. That's why they're sterile as soon as they get estrogen, because permanent genital
So
atrophy.
even
And then
even
they're
like,
having
how long do you have to be on it to feel these effects? Like, is it like, because the way you're making it sound as if this is like an instant thing. Like, you take one estrogen pill when you're 12 and suddenly you'll never
well,
orgasm again. Ha ha ha,
no, no, no,
right?
no, no. Okay. So the sterility thing, the way they make it sound is that if you have been puberty blocked, like if you have basically like immature gonads, immature testicles, like developmentally immature testicles, the second those get hit with cross-sex hormone levels of estrogen, like we have that video from the TED Talk, it is implied that at that point they cannot produce gametes ever again. But that doesn't mean anorgasmia, but that means sterility. Okay. And then the anorgasmia complaints are all about post-surgery puberty blocked boys. But the dark thing is that a lot of they love to say, well, only 5% of transgender women get genital surgery. And it's like, yeah, they got to grow up and have functional genitals. These puberty blocked kids have what the doctors describe as non-functional genital, like immature child genitals. Like they're gonna want to get operated on more than the adults with functional genitals. So, but okay, that Duke clip is in your DMs right now, and I
Thank
can
you.
send you.
We'll look at this. We'll hear it out. It's about 2 minutes, gang. Let's go to the clip. Let me make sure that it gets up properly. So bear with me a second. My technology abilities. I'm a boomer, so please bear with me. Okay, so there it is. There's a clip. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, Allison. We'll see Allison's lovely reaction face, so apparently not mine, just because how I've set this up. I don't know why we're looking at her, not me, but it is what it is. I'm not going to fuck with it right now. But let's hear what they have to say.
The second is was an observation that I had that every single child who was, or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner stage 2 has never experienced orgasm. I mean, it's really about zero.
I can't hear anything. I'm just.
These are the, of course, these are just assigned male at birth. So trans feminine.
Oh, can my audience at least? I know it was probably you weren't going to be able to, but can
I've seen it before. I thought I was the test to see if other people could see it. I don't care if I see it again as long as other people can see it.
Everyone else can hear it, so you don't matter. Let's keep going. And again, this is 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, who is who again? Who's 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜?
The president of WPath currently.
The current president, and this is what she just, we'll go back because I think this is important because she just said, and I think I just heard it.
The second is was an observation that I had that every single child who was, or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner stage 2 has never experienced orgasm. I mean, it's really about zero. These are the, of course, these are just assigned male at birth, so trans feminine, and it's because they never in their lives are exposed to testosterone. That doesn't change. That doesn't change. So blockers prevent the rise of testosterone, and they don't really go on testosterone at or around surgery or into adulthood. And so we don't know. They're going to have this sensation. There's no question about that. But are they going to be able to achieve sexual satisfaction? It's important in relationships. And I know that from my work with female genital mutilation survivors, that the lack of being able to be intimate with a partner is very important. And so this is what really raised
How does that make you feel, Wick?
Is to say, look, we're going to really, we need
those
to have,
fully reversible.
Hold on, we're gonna
blockers.
Hey, you got to give it another minute. I want to hear. I want to hear the whole thing. I want to hear the whole thing.
I thought it was done.
No,
I can't.
it's not.
I have no idea what's going on right now. And the way your face did it.
Okay, just let me.
I'm so sorry.
Our eyes open about it. I think it's been beneficial talking about it. I know Joe and many others have reported to me, you know, they've they've changed their approach a little bit in their informed consent models, and that we're talking about masturbation now. We're talking about, okay, that's an area of the body that's got very dysphoric for you, but you know what? It's all a penis is just a large clitoris. I mean, it's all the same material. It really is. So, use it for the pleasurable purposes, partially that it was intended, and we'll see what happens. But these are to be answered questions. So, can we avoid puberty and get good adult results? And secondly, how do we assure someone that they're going to be able to be sexually responsive? Do we remove the blockers during the course of their adolescence and let a little bit of puberty come back? Do we delay it a little bit, maybe into Tanner's 3 or 4, maybe before they have their first orgasm?
Okay. I have thoughts. We've gone through it. It sounds like she's actually, like, this doesn't seem hidden. This isn't something that she's hiding, right? It's something that she's talking about as a potential problem. She talks about during the clip that this is an important thing, that it seems to be during this process, that the way that they are doing it now is causing a lack of the ability to orgasm into these young people, and that is a problem that they need to fix. I don't think that makes her evil, right? I think that just shows that, oh, this is a problem, we need to fix it. Does that make sense?
Well, okay, so there are people who say, one, how the fuck did you do this without knowing? Like, how the fuck did you just start giving prostate cancer medication to physically healthy young boys because they have a psychiatric condition? And then, oopsie doopsie, some of them can never experience sexual intimacy ever. Like, this is why bioethics, like, needs to be a thing, and people need to pump the fucking brakes sometimes, because, like, how the fuck? Like, people have been saying for years, Jazz Jennings was made a sexual invalid on national TV. They made Jazz Jennings a genital urinary cripple on national TV. And we've been gaslit, and we've said, that's not happening. That's not happening. That's not happening. And then just for the president to drop in a video, like, oh yeah, none of these boys can orgasm when they grow up. What about it? Like, and then after that happens, a guideline drops that permits puberty blockade at the same stage of development, Tanner stage 2. You hear Marcy Bauer say something like, maybe we block them at Tanner 3, 4. Well, guidelines dropped after that video that said Tanner stage 2 is still fine. So
and
that's
when
really
was
fucking
this
interesting.
video?
March of 2022. And September of
So about 2
2022
years
is
ago.
when WPath SOC 8 dropped.
Interesting. I mean, it does seem irresponsible. It does seem like, I don't know, like, if this is difficult, because, and this is why, gang, just to let my chat know, this is why we do these segments, because Allison knows a lot more about a lot of things that she's interested in than me. So she's going to come in, she's going to explain these things to me, who doesn't know much about it, is a layman, and we're going to converse and talk about it, because I think it's important to see how that kind of interaction works. Because my initial reaction to this is, it feels like you shouldn't experiment on humans, right? To the best of your ability. If someone has cancer, is going to die anyway, right? And you need some radical experimental drug or medication or things like that. Fair enough, right? But this, I don't know, it feels like you should be very sure about the effects of what you're doing before you do it. Now, that said, I think that there are good reasons to have gender-affirming care for people, certain types of gender-affirming care when you're a minor. I think there are good reasons for that, right? Dysphoria is a real problem. There are other things that are real problems, and there is a time limit on these things, right? Once you go through puberty, you've gone through puberty, and it changes you. That said,
it allows you to sexually function as an adult.
Yeah, well,
it does change you.
Yeah. That said, if I would be curious, did the parents and the children know that this was going to be the result when they signed up for it, right? I don't know, right? Like, what are they, because she talks in the clip about changing their consent models to show this fact. when did they do that? How extensive was that? These are what this does is it gives me more questions. It gives me more questions that I would like to look into, right? But again, gang, we haven't even gotten into the leaks yet. This wasn't a leak. This was something that was done at a symposium, it looks like, of some sort at Duke University, and a talk of some sort, a panel, if you will. And I don't know. I'm curious to see what the WPath leaks are. So, because I've had lots of trans discourse on my show, and there's been a lot of people saying a lot of things, left, right, and center, and so I'm curious what the experts have to say. So this is where we're at. We've heard the clip. This is 𝕾𝖎𝖎𝖙, the current president of WPath. That's where we are. Let's get to the leaks. Unless you have more to say on this specifically, in which case the ball's in your court, Allison. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't. There was a. I don't know if you saw this, but a while ago, Marcy, or not Marcy, what's her name? What is her name? The crazy Republican congresswoman from Georgia, QAnon level crazy woman. Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah. She commented so this woman, her name is Diane, and her daughter was trans-identified for a moment, and she said, I was a good Democrat. Of course I was like fine with gay rights. Why not trans rights? And like, she said she was about to like let her daughter, start transitioning, and come to find out that like, testosterone in females, that's like you're inducing menopause. Like basically, you're inducing pseudomenopause. You're making your teenage daughter like have a geriatric reproductive system, and it can be mitigated with things like vaginal estrogen cream, or like there are certain things that you can do to try to mitigate like the symptoms of menopause. But like women aren't meant to go through menopause for 55 years. So like she was like, whoa, they were really just going to let me put my 17-year-old daughter through menopause without telling me. And then she let her not transition for like 6 months. And the girl is just like a gender nonconforming lesbian now, and like doesn't have any gender identity issues. And so she, ever since that happened to her, she's been like crazy invested in this issue. She runs a site called Fourth Wave Now that does a lot of like, she has a lot of moles in these like trans affirming parent groups, and like she has people that go to gender like Wpath conferences and take videos. Like some of the videos we have of some of these gender clinicians saying insane shit come from her. And there's a weird worlds colliding moment where this like kind of hippie like Democrat woman that was just like, they were trying to like harm the reproductive health of my butch lesbian daughter. Like she collided with Marjorie Taylor Greene, because Marjorie Taylor Greene commented on some of her posts and was like, FBI, FBI, talking about the parents of trans children that were in some of these trans affirming parent groups, because these parents were talking about buying their children specialized transgender sex toys because they're trying to prevent anorgasmia. And Fourth Wave Now, maybe her name's Denise, maybe it's not Diane, I don't know, but she says, that's why. That's probably what 𝕬𝖎𝑎𝑚 means when it said, we've updated the consent models. That's probably why you have some of these lunatic parents and trans affirming groups talking about weird ass sex toys for their 12-year-old, because there is like seemingly this belief amongst the clinicians that if you can like get the children to masturbate, they'll be able to orgasm after genital surgery. And like, I don't know what they have to cite this, but like 𝕬𝖎𝑚 alluded to it in that clip. Like they seem to think this, and that's why you have trans parents talking about, I give my transgender daughter this sex toy, because they're desperately trying to prevent this 0 males at T2 orgasm ever. They're desperately trying to prevent that.
Yo, this is a whole nother can of worms. I don't know if I want to get into right now on that.
Well, that's because this is the bioethical issue, is like you are putting children in a position where like intense sexual topics have to be discussed, because you're talking about making them sterile and anorgasmic forever. But it's like that, you know what I mean? Like, but it's like unethical to be talking about sex with kids. So it's like, seems like by design, there's some very, very fucking serious problems. If you know what I mean? Like, but it's like literally, how do you avoid that? Like with the nature of what they're doing, it's sex trait modification. That's what transition is.
Yes. No, I get it. I just it's heavy. It's heavy. I am not I think in principle, if it can if it's for a medical reason, right? And it's to fix a medical problem, I think that it should be allowed, right? It's obviously something that
I have
okay,
a dog doing silly spins in the background if you hear weird
fair
groaning.
enough. We don't hear anything, but that's okay. Silly spin dog, a-okay with me. But it it's heavy because it hits us because again, you're right. In every other circumstance, you would hear a sentence like that, like I bought my 12-year-old a sex toy and helping them masturbate, right? And you would be like, what the fuck? But in a situation where they are trying to prevent a lifetime of anorgasmia, as you call it, right? The inability to orgasm, you think, well, I mean, it's a medical thing, but it's just you're right. I think that it's one of those things that's a serious concern, and it needs to be discussed in a serious manner. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Right, like give let's say that this policy that they have, right? I don't know the statistics on it, the sources on it, but let's say there are. But there's a real medical reason to do that, right? Would you be okay with that, right? If it would actually work to prevent anorgasmia, sorry.
Um, Not for psychiatric patients. For patients with a physiopathology, like for the record, the only areas of medicine allegedly where you have to talk about fertility preservation and like sexual health preservation with children, allegedly, literally the only areas are pediatric gender transition and advanced reproductive cancers. Like those are literally the only times when we're like, what do we do with the sexual health of young children? Because typically it's just like assumed that like you don't fuck with that. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm kind of like, I'm sorry. I know that I know it's a difficult psychiatric condition to experience. Lots of psychiatric conditions are difficult to experience. I do not believe lifetime sexual impairment is an acceptable iatrogenic harm of a pediatric psychiatry intervention. Do not point like zero. I have no tolerance for it, but I'm like real biased on all the mentally ill stuff.
You are
Okay,
real
so
biased on this,
yeah,
and
no,
this
so
is
don't take I'm like not an impartial person. Okay, I'm coming at it from that.
noted. I think it deserves a conversation at least. And we haven't even gotten to the leaks yet. We haven't got to the leaks yet. So fair enough. That's a lot. I do think that certain types, like again. So before we get to the leaks, and to be clear to my audience, I have not seen the leaks yet. The whole point of this segment is I'm going to be exposed to these things for the first time. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go. That Allison will frame it, and she has her biases. Okay, and she will frame it in her biased way. Keep that in mind going forward. But it is something that I think is worth looking into. And we're going to do that live on WhickTV tonight. Because I'll tell you my position going into this. And we'll see if it changes or if I start to question it as we go. So my position coming into this is that while obviously I am against surgery for minors, I think that if certain medicines, hormones, other treatments can be made in a way that is reversible or is mitigatable, I think it should be offered and allowed under the care of a physician. If a physician, if a parent, and if a child consent to it, right? And this is seen as a medical necessity or medically desirable, I think it should be allowed, and we shouldn't be preventing it with legislation and things like that. That's my position going in. Again, surgery is another ball game. I don't like surgery for minors, much like I wouldn't want you to get a tattoo, right? As a kid, I don't want you getting gender affirming surgery as a kid. That's my position. Okay, let's get to these leaks. Let's see what's been said. Let's see if it changes my mind. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I'm just gonna this is I think one of the hardest hitting like blurbs from that video transcript. And it's a MD out of I think Vancouver, whoever BC Children's Hospital is, okay, and like maple leaf land. But here, let me let my dog out, and then I'll read you this blurb. But
Okay.
this was
I'll read.
either part. Oh, what were you saying?
No, it's if I thought you were gonna be dead air for a minute, but no, if you're not, go ahead.
Okay. So the video for this is online, and also transcripts of it are like online. Michael Schellenberger's nonprofit put out all this stuff, like massive file dump. Anybody can download this for free. So this is Dan Metzger, MD of BC Children's Hospital, Canada. I was just gonna say, like it's always a good theory that you talk about fertility preservation with a 14-year-old, but I know I'm talking to a blank wall. And the same would happen for a cisgender kid, right? They'd be like, ew, kids, babies, gross. Or the usual answer is, I'm gonna adopt. I'm just gonna adopt. And then you ask them, well, what does that involve? Like, how much does it cost? Oh, I thought you just like went to the orphanage and they gave you a baby. No, it's not quite like that. And I was just trying to find it, but I can't quickly locate it because I only have is like a picture of a slide. But apparently last week at the Pediatric Endocrine Society, some of the Dutch researchers started they gave some data about young adults who had transitioned and reproductive regret. Like regret, it's there. I don't think that surprises any of us. I don't remember any of the numbers or anything. Again, I have a picture of one slide, but hopefully this is something that will get published in the next while. But I think now that I just follow a lot of kids in their mid-20s, I'm always like, oh, the dog isn't doing it for you, right? Yeah, they're just like, no, I found this, wonderful partner, and now we want kids and da da da. So I think, it doesn't surprise me, but I don't know still what to do for the 14-year-olds. The parents have it on their minds, but the 14-year-olds, it's like talking with diabetic complications with a 14-year-old. They do not care. They're not going to die. They're just going to live forever, right? So I think when we're doing informed consent, I know that's still a big lacuna of that. We do it, we try to talk about it, but most of the kids are nowhere in any kind of a brain space to really talk about it in a serious way. That's always bothered me. But we still want the kids to be happier in the moment, right?
It sounds to me as if they're reckoning, right, with the idea of informed consent with a child, right? They are saying that we recognize that it's hard to really get across some of these concepts to these kids this age because they don't understand this concept this age. They're not developed enough to understand this concept at this age, right? And as much as you try to teach them, it seems to be, at least this particular MD, you said it was, a medical doctor,
Mm-hmm.
right? This particular medical doctor is expressing frustration with it a little bit on how they are frustrated and the fact that they can't really seem to get that through the heads of their patients. Was this one of the leaks?
It was part of that big video.
Okay.
It honestly, like, okay, it was pretty humanizing for me because I could tell it's not like, I have ethical disagreements with these people, whatever. They're not like character, like evil, like caricature. They
Yeah,
think
it
they're
sounds like
doing the right thing.
yeah, it sounds like she was really concerned and wanted to make these people's lives happier. Like she says that at the end there. At least in how she's communicating, it sounds like she really cares for these kids and she wants them to be happier. And she thinks that, this is kind of the best way forward, but she's having frustration because she can't really communicate, explain the concept in a way that she thinks that they can really grasp and comprehend.
Well,
So
I just like I cannot think of anything that matters less, like consequentially in your life, than like whether or not you want kids when you're 13. Like, who cares? You're 13, you don't know anything. Like, it's like you I don't know, the idea that there's like any level of consent procedure that you could do to like communicate what it means like to a child, like you will never genetically reproduce. Like that it's not going to happen, it's never going to happen. And they kind of deal with that, and they kind of talk about how, like, yeah, obviously legally it falls on the parents. But there's one quote, and I'm trying to find it right now, and they're basically commenting on like, what the WPATH files people, they frame it as a lack of health literacy, and that's basically what it sounds like. It's like you were like, how much did the parents understand that the kids were going to be anorgasmic forever? Like, there's a quote, and I want to find it, but it's basically like, there's this concerning thing that keeps happening where a parent asked me a question and they signed a document months ago that made abundantly fucking clear that they apparently know that thoroughly through and through. And it's like, it keeps happening where like these parents, they say they understand, they say they're understanding, but they are deferring to the doctors. They are expecting that the doctors are exercising clinical judgment and only prescribing them stuff that they need. They don't understand that it's like a choice. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to find it, but you saw how many pages I had. So
You
it's just
sent
a
me a
lot.
lot.
But
And this is a leak again, right? This is something that was leaked
yeah.
with the documents.
Yeah, this is from it's like, I don't know the name of the symposium, but it's like it's 6 people. It's like a mix of MDs, PhDs, and one person named Jameson Green, who I looked up, and another, no, Jameson Green, I think, is the only non-clinician. And like, apparently iconic trans man activist. Okay. Apparently, like, very, I don't know much about trans man activism. Okay. But apparently, this person was like one of the first visible trans men. And I was like, there's a quote from him, and I'm like, well, that's just extremely insightful. And I'm like, like, okay, that makes sense because this person has super direct experience. But there's just like, I'm going to try to find his statement, but it's about the culture of like rushing into treatments. All these patients are rushing into treatments. Nobody's sitting around and thinking about it and pondering it. But okay, wait. So I'm going to give you the preface. This is an MD named 𝕾𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜, okay? And she's out of a Rady's Children's Hospital in, I think, San Diego. And she says, in this area of healthcare right now, multidisciplinary care is so important, and being able to collaborate with each other is so, so important and so helpful, because sometimes we're not, maybe in the context of a medical appointment, the conversations that need to happen can't happen. And then maybe there needs to be further conversation with a mental health provider to help make sure patients and children have all the information they need to make the best decisions for themselves. Then Jameson Green comes in and says, our healthcare system doesn't, if I may jump in here, our healthcare system doesn't encourage this. I mean, if you have a clinic, like already, like a university setting where Diane is, or where Cecile is even, and I'm not sure where you are exactly, Dan, but I know many people providing this care are independent practitioners, and they're referring their clients to surgeons across the country, and their endocrinologist might be their actual, they may not ever have actually their own endocrinologist. So that kind of is like stretching out. But then this person says they may be able to get their hormones prescribed through their primary care provider, who doesn't really know necessarily everything about trans care. They're basically trying to be supportive. And our healthcare system, it leaves us in the lurch all the time. And so I agree that we don't necessarily need to be able to have, if have a known condition like diabetes, you don't have to understand every nuance about what the insulin is going to do to you in order to give informed consent. But because there's so much experience with that, but in this field, this is all new, this is all contentious, and that's where we run into problems, because everyone's afraid. And I know for a fact, people, even adults, even well-educated older adults accessing care for the first time, sit down with the person who's going to prescribe their hormones, and they look at an informed consent form that says your hormones are going to do this, this, and this, and they don't take any of that in because they are so scared that they're not going to get what they want. They just show me where to sign because this is my moment, I got to grab it, and they don't really take in the information.
Couple
And
thoughts.
that note about the primary care provider, a lot of psychiatrists will say, and this is like, because I mean, gender dysphoria, I know, is part of psychiatry, and that's how I first got interested in it, was because I was like so interested in stuff happening in psychiatry. But there are people in psychiatry like Alan Francis, like Joel Paris, people who criticize diagnostic inflation a lot and over diagnosing people and over prescribing stuff. And they say, y'all can bitch at the psychiatrist, but a lot of it's primary care doctors. It's like, we have got such a clinician shortage in the US. It's like a lot of people are just, they don't have any direct experience with this, and they're just basically doing what a manual has told them because their patient's going to be on a 9-month wait list if they don't. And so it's like, it seems like this person is implying that, like, yeah, it's like real great and nice that we can like talk about all the unknowns about puberty blockers and stuff, But, at the end of the day, there's a shit ton of PR talking about how fully reversible they are. And a lot of these kids are coming to us already puberty blocked from primary care doctors. That's like the implication of that. That's what I got from that blurb. So people can like disagree with that interpretation of it. But I thought that's what I interpreted Jameson Green as saying. And I
Okay.
almost like from what I don't even know
Finish
if
your
I want to get
point.
into that
Finish your
rabbit hole.
point,
But
and then we'll. I have a couple thoughts on this. if
you
I
go
may.
first. You go first. I don't want to ramble too much.
Sure. One of them is kind of. Well, I have 3 things to say. 4 things. Since thank you for the $5 original logo. So 4 things to say now. 2 are kind of unconnected to this, but are connected to the subject as a whole. Let me get to the super chat first. Original logos for $5. What the heck is going on? I just got here and are confused. We're going over the Wpath leaks that were recently published. And Allison is in this new segment we're doing. Allie explains. Allison is explaining to me their significance, what they mean, why they're important. My thoughts on let's address the issue first. So my thoughts on what you just told me. Again, these at least what we've been listening to and shared with me so far, these seems to come from a place of actual care for their patients, right? I want to keep that forefront. Like these people are trying to figure out what best to do to help these kids that are struggling, that have these issues, right? So I want to preface that by saying that. However, I do think that what is said here, at least in a segment of it, is indicative of a larger problem with this discourse as a whole. They mention, and I'm going to paraphrase here, excuse me if I get it wrong, and please correct me if I totally mess it up, but that a lot of patients don't want to read the information about what the hormones will do. They just want to sign it because this is their time and their moment, and they know that they want to do this and they have to do this. That kind of way of thinking does not scream conscientious decision making to me. It screams, I've been told socially that I need to do this and I've been yas queened or whatever into doing this, and now I get a chance to do this. I'm not going to let anything hold me back. That kind of thinking. That does not seem wise, especially when we're talking about these, in some cases, life-altering kinds of things, right? Again, this is from a layman, right? Maybe they're less life-altering than I think. But when we talk about inorgasmia or sterilization and these kinds of topics, then yeah, it's not something that's an easy fix. So I worry about that, and it actually does my heart good to see that the clinicians are worried about this too, because it seems to be something that they are concerned about in this discussion. So that's that. I'm going on long-winded, right?
Oh, no rush at all. I'm following you.
My third thing I wanted to say and kind of broach to you, because it's an opportunity that has been presented to me, but I'm not sure if it's ethical to go with it. A trans youth has actually DM'd me and wants to kind of come on and talk about it, but they are a minor. They're 16 years old. I don't know if that's ethical to do. They are absolutely important to the conversation, right? But it's a kid. And I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, it's extremely intimate medical
Yeah, it's a
information.
bad idea. Yeah, okay, that's what I'm getting at. I'm seeing a no.
So it's not like I feel so bad. I'm like not trying to be that like because I don't know this person who they are, okay, but I would be like maybe raging if I was 16 years old and I'm like, this shit has saved my life and this bitch is bitching about it and now she won't talk to me. Like I can like imagine that this person is like very pissed off. Okay, I promise I'm not trying to do that. I promise I'm not trying to do that. I just like it does like 13 like 16 they're young, you know what I mean?
It's
like
just too like, but this is the
we're
problem. I hope, here's what I hope happens. I hope that they in chat or somewhere that they can have their say, right? Like on Twitter, if you tweet something out about this, I will repost it, right? I will make sure that it gets signal boosted. But having you on my show to talk about this just seems like a very bad idea. like you said, this is why I broached it, because I was like, this is my intuition says, but it's happening to
'Cause
them, right?
I'm imagining, and then maybe this is not how it's gonna go, but I'm imagining, I'm gonna be honest, that like my main thing is just like point blank period. You can't be stripping like pediatric psych patients of sexual function. And
Mm,
I'm imagining that this 16-year-old is going to come in and say,
I have no
"You're
idea.
wrong. I have sexual function." And it's like, bro, we cannot be talking about sexual function with 16-year-olds. Like, I'm like, it's nothing personal. It's nothing personal. I
Yeah.
promise. I promise. I promise.
Okay.
Like, dissenters are welcome. Okay. Dissenters of age are welcome. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's the.
But plus, I don't think it's even good to like go too much into the personal experience of any one person, because like any single psychiatric medical scandal is not going to fuck over literally every single last person who falls into it. You know what I mean? Like, um there are people who participated in like recovered memory therapies and shit that is like now viewed as like very quack like by psychiatry, and their social lives weren't entirely ruined. They didn't completely excommunicate their family, and like maybe they even felt better. Maybe they even felt like the narratives they learned about their like uncovered memories and stuff, maybe they felt like that completed their life more. You know what I mean? Like, but still, recovered memory therapy was like rightfully rejected by the courts whenever it got like in front of it enough times. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you'll hear some people on the pediatric child's like transition skeptical side, and they do this, like, in my opinion, very cringy thing where like you have a person who transitioned as a child, they are espousing happiness, you have no reason to think that they're like mentally unstable or whatever, and they're just insisting like, no, you're secretly a basket case, you're secretly fucking mentally ill and miserable. And it's like, you don't know that, and that doesn't have to be true. Like, it like probably a lot of these people are doing like fine, and like they're well adjusted enough, but that doesn't mean that it's ethical. That doesn't mean that it's medically justified. That doesn't mean that yeah.
Do
So
you mind if I bring in Malcolm?
I
Who
love Malcolm. Yes.
is that okay? Can we bring in
Yes.
Malcolm for this
Yeah.
so we can have
I'm
an
pro
actual?
Malcolm.
So
Yes.
maybe this is we can have an actual transgender on the panel, right? Like maybe cringe to say, but
Well, no, Malcolm is like pretty like well read on like psychiatric
sure.
stuff aside from
So
gender
okay,
dysphoria. So
Malcolm, welcome. You're joining us.
Oh,
This is
sorry, I was
we're
muted.
talking about the leaks. We're talking about the things. Do you have a camera for us today?
Ooh, I can turn on my
Please,
virtual camera.
please do.
Give me
Please do.
1 second.
But I assume you've been following along so far.
I just tuned in about like 5 minutes ago.
Oh, so you're just here. So let me kind of give you what we've gone over so far. We're doing a new segment, Allison Explains, where she comes in and explains these things to me. And I wanted her to explain the Wpath leaks because she's very researched on this and she has a lot of thoughts. And I wasn't sure the importance or what it meant and things like that. And so I had her come on to kind of explain to me. But it's good that you're here. Thank you for being here.
Sure thing.
The things that we've gone over through first, we
Mhm.
talked about a 2-minute clip that wasn't part of the leaks, but it was from a symposium, a panel of some sort at Duke University, where 𝕾𝖎𝖎 talks about how males, I think it was males, who take Tanner stage 2
I'm familiar
hormones,
with that.
okay, are unable to have orgasms.
Mhm.
And how that was a problem, right? We also talked about some of the leaks where they talk about informed consent and how some of the medical doctors who are involved with Wpath are worried that they're unable to be communicate properly the effects of some of these hormones and other things on the kids. And they are discussing like the how to better kind of communicate the long-term ramifications of some of this, like sterilization and adoption, I think was one of those things. Are you familiar at all? Please, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I guess I'll just preface by saying, God. So the way that I always talk about this is something that is important when we're talking about children transitioning and minors transitioning is we need to be really specific with age, because there's going to be something different. There's going to be a different set of expectations for a 17-year-old that's about to turn 18 years old versus like what do we do with a 5-year-old that's like expressing or manifesting symptoms of gender dysphoria. So that's one thing that I like to be clear about. I don't believe in any kind of surgical intervention other than like top surgery for anybody under the age of 18, and that puberty blockers and medical transition should be used as a last resort, that there should be other kind of things that we're trying in the meantime, social transition, psychotherapy, talk therapy, EMDR, like whatever it is, in order to try to manage these symptoms so we can make more informed decisions into adulthood. And as far as informed consent is concerned, I kind of look at it as this double-edged sword, especially when we're talking about psychiatric interventions for children as well. Because if we look at the long-term effects of SSRIs, if we look at the long-term effects of Adderall and stimulant usage on developing brains, we can see that these are incredibly detrimental in the long run for most kids that end up being on them. I also heard Allison talk a little bit about the idea of overdiagnosis, and this is definitely a problem with things like autism, with ADHD, and with overprescribing SSRIs and things like that as well. I will say that I'm very familiar with the 𝕵𝖎𝖎𝖙 interview where she talks about preserving sexual function for minors and losing the ability to orgasm. There is no academic literature that going on to puberty blockers and then later going on to start cross-sex hormones reduces or diminishes the ability to reach orgasm. It does, however, affect fertility, which is true. Puberty blockers themselves, if you go on puberty blockers, you take them for a few years, decide, I don't actually want to medically transition, and you don't go on cross-sex hormones, there is no evidence that you will lose fertility. The only time that you will lose fertility is if you do go on cross-sex hormones following puberty blockers, because your like natal development is essentially halted and replaced with a different development. And as far as like puberty blockers being a new medication, the only new aspect of puberty blockers themselves is doing a transition from puberty blockers onto cross-sex hormones. We know what puberty blockers do. We've been using puberty blockers since the 1980s to treat precocious puberty in individuals that go through puberty at an inappropriate age. So if you're 9 years old and you have your first period, that's not developmentally appropriate. It's difficult on the body, so we'll put you on puberty blockers so you can wait to develop naturally at a more appropriate age. We know the long-term effects of puberty blockers as far as bone density is concerned, and as far as IQ being delayed, that development is delayed due to the puberty blockers in some cases.
IQ is in the brain stuff, right?
Yes.
Is that cool? It delays
Yeah.
IQ. Well, this explains
It
trans
can.
Twitter, but fair enough. Go ahead.
True. I mean, it can delay, but you will catch up once you stop taking them. So all the studies that I've seen, if you delay the natal onset of puberty, like you are developmentally like less than your peers or lower than your
If you
peers.
decide to transition, do you ever stop taking puberty blockers?
Yes. So you would stop taking puberty blockers and replace them with cross-sex hormones whenever that age would be.
Well, so two things. The first thing is the precocious puberty stuff. I
Mhm.
think all of that is like pretty well settled with the female population, but like the vast majority of precocious puberty patients were girls, like young
Mhm.
girls who specifically started their periods early. And I'm not saying that no boys like got treated for precocious puberty, but like if you look at all the papers they cite to say, see, the precocious puberty kids turn out fine, it's like always more than 90%, sometimes more than 95% girls. And then whenever they're citing, but males who go off GnRHA, their testicular function resumes as normal. They're always citing advanced prostate cancer patients, so like fully grown men. So I am not seeing a database of like a lot of teenage boy or like pubescent males that were GnRHA'd several years, taken off, and then their penises developed and they were able to like produce sperm. I have not seen papers. There's not papers that say it doesn't happen, but there's not papers saying it happens. So when they're saying it's
For sure.
reversible, it's reversible, it's reversible. I don't actually I don't know that they like. I don't know why they feel confident saying that about like
Well,
the
because
boys at least.
Marcy Bowers is the only person who has ever made the assertion that puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2 diminish sexual function. I'm not talking about reproductive capacity. I'm talking about like the ability to orgasm. There is no evidence that blocking puberty at Tanner stage 2, even in males, diminishes your ability to have sexual
So
function.
why?
But there's not a
just
lot
thought
of
as an aside, as someone who's layman, who's not familiar with this, as both of you seem to be, right? Why would she say that if, like, she, at least in the conversation she was had, and again, she's the head of Wpath. It seems to be that this is something. For me, I think to myself, well, if she's saying that, there must be some issue that is going on that she's referring to. Why would she say that otherwise? Does that make
Because
sense?
she's basing her experience with the sexual the sexual function. She's basing almost all of her perspective and positions on that off of Jazz Jennings. So Jazz Jennings took puberty blockers, got bottom surgery at the age of 17 because she took puberty blockers and did not go through natal puberty. She did not develop enough penile tissue for a successful vaginoplasty, so they had to use additional tissues. I think they used colon tissue, I believe, to actually have an adequate depth for the vaginal canal that they created while doing vaginoplasty. And so anything that she is kind of regurgitating in regards to vaginoplasty with minors is based on her experience performing surgery on Jas Jennings. That's where she's getting a lot of her data points from. And it isn't reflective of the actual hormone blockers
That was
themselves.
a remarkably retarded thing for her to say then on that panel.
Yes, it was
Remarkably
because there's no evidence, and she's the
Well,
only person that's ever claimed this.
wait, can I
Please,
there
go.
is no evidence,
I'm gonna
but
get a
there's
drink,
no
by the way,
evidence
so
one
give me a
way or
second.
the other. Like I think the argument is yeah, there is no papers, but do they not kind of have an obligation to show us papers saying we have reason to believe it's safe? You know what I mean? We have reason to believe that sexual function can be preserved. Because there's that video. Do you know the Blair Peters footage? Do you know who that is that I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So he acknowledges in that little blurb, he says no papers published one way or the other. So you're right. There's no evidence saying that it's bad, but there's no evidence, period. There have been zero
Well, we can
papers
see.
published.
I'm gonna shoot this to you really quick. I'm just gonna pop out the chat of the call that we're in right now, Allison. I'm gonna send you this. Oh fuck, hang on, my Discord is shitting the fuck
No,
out.
so you can't post the link. I don't let my guests
Oh,
post.
I see.
You know what I mean? Because you guys are all crazy. You can do it
I
either in
shot
the
it.
research section of the Discord, there's a channel for that, or you can just DM her it directly.
Yeah, I shot it to Allison and I shot it to you. So something that I would find interesting is that if this was a big issue where sexual function isn't preserved and not reproductive capacity, but sexual function itself, if this is something that is a devastating issue for people, including males, who go on puberty blockers before Tanner stage 2 of puberty, why is this not reported in any long-term follow-ups of children that go on puberty blockers and then later go into cross-sex hormones? Why do they never report that this is an issue if this is something that is very common and something that happens?
I mean, I think there's a really intense culture of not which okay, this happens in I Am Jazz. The Jeanette Jennings, the mom,
Mm.
says to Jazz, don't Jazz is about to go on an interview like the Today Show or something after getting vaginoplasty,
Mhm.
and Jazz is talking about I want to be honest, and the mom is like, you better not get too graphic describing your complications because other trans kids might be afraid to get the care they need. And Jazz goes on the interview and is kind of badass and talks about the complications a little bit anyway, and it's just honest. And the mom fucking yells, gets mad. I don't have a link to that on hand, but that happened on TLC. That happened on national
Well,
TV. And if you give me time, I
again,
can find it. There is a culture of and you'll see it even on Reddits and stuff. You'll see people talking about hey, I'm taking this post down because I think it can be used as ammo by the right. Which there are people who just hunt these Reddits and they look for somebody who's having a bad day to screenshot it and say, see, it's all bullshit. That is happening. But
well,
it's
sure.
because of that, there is a culture of you better not fucking talk about the gory shit
Well,
because
again, there's two aspects of that. One, again, I want to be clear that the claim that there is sexual dissatisfaction with Jas Jennings specifically, and this is what 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙 made that statement about, is because Jas Jennings did not develop Natalie as a male. She didn't have enough penile tissue for vaginoplasty, so they had to use colon tissue instead. It wasn't about the sexual impotence of going on puberty blockers before Tanner stage 2. That is completely unfounded. And in trans spaces, in insular spaces, all of this is graphically described. These are not found in public areas. So something that is really, really true, at least for trans men, I will say, is that if you want resources for phalloplasty, they are gatekept behind 100 fucking people, and they are gatekept behind 100 different fucking websites, because what ends up happening is that people do farm a lot of this content in order to demonize trans people or talk about, the disgusting realities of trans surgery and mutilation and this, that, and the other thing. People talk about this freely and openly and candidly in closed spaces because anytime that it is leaked, it is just a fucking PR nightmare. And
This-
people's personal photos are being used to say, like, look at what this fucking disgusting female did to her body. Look at how mutilated she is. So it's reasonable to me that you can't just get on Reddit and find all of these posts about complications and shit like that when you aren't even in the pool to get vaginoplasty. These are resources that we generally keep to ourselves because we don't want the trouble associated with it. And again, I will drive home that the issues with Marcy Bowers talking about sexual function is related specifically to 𝕻𝖎 not having enough penile tissue for vaginoplasty that was supplemented with other tissues.
So let
But
me.
the
I wanna, because you mentioned something that I think is kind of relevant to the discussion at hand, which is the Wpath leaks. And remember that clip we saw wasn't part of the Wpath leaks, so we're not even at the leaks yet. May I ask you, Malcolm?
Mhm.
How familiar are you with the leaks themselves? Have you gone over them? Have you read the
I have.
report and things like that?
Mhm.
Give us your, like, Allison gave us her initial impression of these.
Mhm.
Give us yours.
My impression is just that these were emails people were bouncing back and forth. There's a lot of hysteria. Hysteria probably isn't the right word. There's a lot of concern for children and adolescents accessing medical transition and transition related care. And we've seen other countries that have kind of led the charge with the Dutch model, like Sweden, and other European countries that are kind of rolling back or putting the brakes on as far as children are transitioning. And in my opinion, it reads to me like people that are just having discussions about the optics of the kind of informed care that they're providing. And I think that there is a really, really interesting and important question to talk about when we talk about children's ability to offer informed consent for transition related care. That is a very important question. However, it gets diluted into this just kind of like scare tactic of like professionals having their private conversations about their own concerns leaked and then weaponized to be like, see, look, even they don't know what the fuck they're doing, right?
Well, that's what it just, if I may, like, as a layman here, the two quotes that we read, it does feel like and seem like that there are questions about the effects of these things and how they are applied that is still an open question. And so it does bring to mind, as someone who's just reading this, right? Like the idea of experimenting, right? Or using experimental procedures, especially on kids, just rubs me the wrong way. Now, this might
Yeah,
not
for
be
sure.
what's happening. This might not be what, like, this may all be blown out of proportion. Again, I don't know. But you understand how that comes off, right? Like that if
No,
you,
absolutely.
yeah, does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think the biggest issue again is that this is email correspondence between people that are talking about kind of the optics of all of this. And again, I do not support children getting bottom surgery. I do not approve of children getting surgical interventions except for like in extremely rare circumstances. Like if you're a trans guy who has like triple F tits and you're like 17, it's like, okay, do we really have to wait another month? I think that that's a little bit acceptable. But if we're talking specifically about like hormone intervention, puberty blockers, and cross-sex hormones for youths, I think it should be used as like a last ditch effort, but like this isn't like medical experimentation. We know what testosterone does to female bodies. We know what estrogen does to male bodies. We know what puberty blockers do. The only new component of this is transitioning from puberty blockers to cross-sex hormones. And there is going to be a learning curve with that. And that's why I think that we should be sparing when we use it. But to say that we just trash all of this because a couple of people are emailing back and forth being like, dude, I don't know, maybe we should be like a little bit more clear about this. Or like, I don't know, like this is looking a little fucky. And those leaks are what we look to justify and say like, we need to throw the whole fucking thing out is pretty stupid in my opinion.
Allison, go ahead.
I just I felt like when I was reading the leaks, the main allegation is that WPATH is not just like this neutral scientific professional organization that's just like come up with evidence-based standards for gender dysphoria. Like the allegation is that it is a trans activist like medical society. And like, you could think that's a good thing and that's fine to
Well,
think
what do
it's
you
a good
define
thing,
as a
but I
trans
do
activist society? Like, what do you mean like they're a trans activist society? What is their goal?
Um, well, like they have a very like certain conceptual view of gender identity, and they consider this to be like basically factually true. Like there's one leak where they're talking about I don't know what to do because my client, they're talking about a person who they call a trans woman, but it's unclear if this person actually even like identified as a woman. But they're talking about how this person had basically like philosophical views about gender identity that were like problematic, and like this might be a silly question, but should I send them to a philosopher? Like I don't know what to do, haha. And like there's just a lot of like what I would consider like the biggest thing I notice is like every time a quote unquote things are framed as barriers to access or gatekeeping instead of safeguarding. And like I thought that there was just a lot of content about like, yeah, obviously sometimes trans people are seriously mentally ill and psychosis doesn't, stop somebody from getting gender affirming care. Like, yeah, obviously, no, sometimes people are dissociating and they're in like intense trauma therapy and they're like really unstable and they're like lacking in hygiene, like failing to take care of themselves in very basic ways. But waiting, doing nothing is not a neutral act. Waiting, not giving them HRT, that's not a neutral act. That's not doing nothing. Like, it's this very like, it is kind of hysterical, like, act now, act now, act now. Like, they're literally gonna fucking die if they don't get gender affirming care right now. Like, there is that like tone to a lot of these messages, and that's what I mean when I say like trans activists. Like, they sound like certain characters on Twitter that are just like basically like throwing like suicide threats around every time people are talking about like systematic
Well,
reviews say one
as a
thing.
practitioner, that's something that you have to take into consideration. Like you have to take into consideration that this is something that somebody is like maybe willing to do if they're not able to access the care that they want. And again, the biggest issue with the American system and our failure to adhere perfectly to the Dutch model is that we don't have any supplemental options other than medical transition. So in Sweden and other countries where they're rolling back on affirmation only, which I think is, neither here nor there, if you have somebody who comes out as trans and they say, dude, I'm super dysphoric, like I'm super fucked up, I really want to transition, and you say, no, you have to wait until you're 18, good luck. That person is probably going to kill themselves in a video game. Like, you're going to have some kind of supplemental help here. But in America, we don't have any of that. So part of the problem with WPATH is that they are really emphasizing medical transition because we know that medical transition is the best Jesus Christ, the best evidence-based practice to alleviate gender dysphoria, because that is like the goal of WPATH, is to treat gender dysphoria. Like, I wouldn't say that like if there was a World Health Organization of Adderall that they're like trying to stuff ADHD diagnoses down people's throats. That's
Little
just like their goal, right?
If
Is
I
to alleviate the
you
suffering of
you
ADHD.
said something that I have a question on. You said that the Dutch
Mhm.
are rolling back their affirmation only model.
Mhm.
You said that's neither here nor there, but as someone
Mhm.
who has heard the discussions around trans medical care in America, in
Mhm.
Britain, right? The
Mhm.
affirmation model is an important part of the discussion here still. Now, if
Yeah.
the Dutch are rolling this back and
It's
the
not.
other European countries are rolling this back, then I have
It's Sweden and
questions, right?
Switzerland mostly.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not the affirmation care only model that they're rolling back. It's that they're putting a pause on like speed lining, quote unquote. Speed lining is an aggressive word to use, but medical transition. So in America, the DSM, the criteria to medically transition as a minor, is incredibly rigorous. In other countries, their criteria is much more rigorous than ours, and they're saying we need to take a break really quick and we should try other alternatives. Like, we should try social transitioning, we should try psychotherapy, we should try talk therapy, we should try EMDR, we should try all of these different things. And then at the end of the line, if nothing makes them feel better, then okay, let's go ahead and medically transition, because the default is right now medical transition for sure. And I think that there should be other options on the table for people to pursue. But in America, we don't practice any of those other options because the only thing that exists is like religious conversion therapy, and that's the issue with it.
Interesting. Allison hopefully will be back in a minute because I'm curious her thoughts. Go ahead.
Yeah, so okay, okay, I kind of believe like this shit might be a real big medical scandal. I believe that. I'm not biased, or I am biased. I'm not impartial. That's what I meant to say. I am biased. I'm not impartial.
What's the
Okay.
scandal?
And the idea that like they've been saying some shit is fully reversible,
Puberty
and it's
blockers are
like
fully reversible if you don't go on cross-sex hormones.
we don't know that with the
We
males.
do.
We do not
We
know
do.
that. We don't know
We
that
do.
like sexually developmentally sensitive males, like virtually prepubescent males that get GnRHA'd for 2 to 3 years, we do not know that they get off puberty blockers and their penises just grow like normal. Because there are anecdotal reports, like Corinna Cohn, who we had on Wick when we were. Corinna Cohn claims that at GC Can they've gotten anecdotal reports, so not scientific, okay, not scientific, but Corinna Cohn claims that they've gotten anecdotal reports of like a desisting boy who like his penis won't grow and he has erectile dysfunction, and he's like 17 and he was GnRHA'd for 3 years and now he has a micro penis, and it's like maybe he would have had a micro penis that like never got hard anyway. But he was given prostate cancer medication for 3 years at a developmentally sensitive window. And it's like, you're right, we don't have papers that say it's dangerous, but I don't think we have a shit ton of papers that say like, yeah, when you give it to boys it's safe. With the girls, I'm with you. I understand that like there is a shit ton of data that says there is a small amount that will have bone issues and stuff with females. Like, I understand, but with the boys, like, and it does seem like the early transitioning motivation is like applied most to boys, because androgenization is like more intense than estrogenization. You know what I mean? They keep saying like it's male puberty is less reversible. You know what I mean? Like, the facial feminization is so expensive, and like there is this like intense pressure, I think, to puberty block them particularly early when it's a male child. And that's the exact type of cohort who we have the least data on, like reversibility. Like, I don't know if I'm making sense or not, but
No, it makes sense. There's just like no evidence that this is the case because, like you said, this guy could have just had a micro penis anyway.
Are there studies
Um,
being done out of curiosity?
there are studies that are done as far as like people that will go on puberty blockers and then transition to cross-sex hormones and then their outcomes based on that. There's also a ton of research on females and precocious puberty, but I'm not.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
talking
looking
about
around
the
right now.
males that she's referring to, though, right?
I'm looking around right now. I'm not.
the
Hang on, I gotta
only
look.
the only group I've ever seen them cite is prostate cancer patients, which are adult men that are fully sexually mature. And so I wouldn't expect that data about sexual function to just be directly extrapolatable to like prepubescent boys.
Would it change at all if like 98% of kids that go on puberty blockers like continue on to cross-sex hormones, or is that still like a big no in your opinion?
Well, at that point, it's like, because that is the case. A shit ton of them go on, and it's like you interpret that one of two ways. Oh, trans kids know who they are from the very beginning, and we're so good at diagnosing it that we're just that fucking accurate. Or two, there is some neurologic impediment happening. There is some like developmental process that is maybe being skipped out on. They are less likely to desist than they would have been in decades past. That IQ delay, maybe that, you know, doesn't help a person come to terms with their body at like the pubertal stage the way they would have in decades past. A lot of unknowns. I'm not saying, it's just there are multiple ways that you can interpret it. I'm not saying that I can definitely prove this what's happening, but I'm saying like there seems to be a possibility that's happening. For me, like the clear, obvious, reasonable possibility is like enough to be like, whoa, hands off. But I am somebody that's following the like PSSD, like post SSRI sexual dysfunction debate. And I'm like, that might be a big scandal, because like, if it is true, what they're saying is that like there are a bunch of people who are just like basically impotent forever because they took sugar pills for depression that in the past would have just been called normal human adversity. I'm like, that is a scandal if true. And it might be true. I don't know. I like haven't read about that as much about like WPATH, but you're right. It's not like there's just this only one area of medicine where there's maybe a scandal happening. It's like, no, clearly there's like a lot of like, the medical field is not infallible. Like, they're people, they can fail. We just had the opioid epidemic not too long ago. Like, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay, $20 from Lawson Harrison. Thank you, guys. Gang, if you want to continue to give me money during this, that'd be very appreciative. I need money to eat and to live. Lawson Harrison for $20. I can't recall the name of the clinic, but there is a controversial facility that practices a non-affirming method of care with relatively high success. Should we consider that way of treatment as conversion therapy? So you got to give me way more information than that.
He
Lawson
might be
Harrison.
referring to the Zucker clinic before they fired Kenneth Zucker. I don't know that for a fact, but he might be referring to the Toronto clinic while Kenneth Zucker was still the head of it. Lawson Harrison, look it up and tell me.
Do you know what he's referring to, Malcolm? I don't.
No.
Okay, yeah, you're gonna need to give us more information, buddy. But if you give us more information, maybe we'll be able to talk about it. But until you do, I can't help. What is your, I guess, so Malcolm, a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Having read these leaks, having read these things, well, two questions actually. One, do you think that the people are reporting on this responsibly, or do you think it's being weaponized? I'm talking outside the Matt Walshes of the world. I'm talking about like the relatively normie media, normie Twitter, things like that, the normie spaces. Do you think this is being weaponized unfairly against transgender care, or do you think that people are kind of like treating this in a more reasonable way? And my second question would be, out of the leaks that were given, what would you consider, if any, to be the most concerning to you personally? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sending both of you guys a Fenway Health PDF, and this accounts for male fertility and male phallometrics as far as puberty blockers are concerned. I just shot that off to both of you. But in terms of like the WPATH leaks, I think that in general, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's being. I think that the problem is outside of like the Matt Walshes and everything. I've seen like in the past, I want to say like 5 years. As far as trans related stuff goes, as far as discourse and news and all that stuff is concerned, we have kind of this weird pit where for the last couple of years this has been on the tip of the culture war spear, where people want to talk about trans kids, they want to talk about protecting young girls, they want to talk about not mutilating little girls, they want to talk about keeping males out of female spaces because of the dangerous, violent, rapist trans women. And what I see is that we have like this vapid pit where nobody on the left is willing to contend with these issues. Nobody on the left that is educated by any means wants to engage with any of these points. They never want to have a rebuttal or anything like that. So I think that what this serves, the WPATH leak serves, is another way to dig that pit deeper. And because nobody is willing to jump in and like roll around in the mud with these people, we build like this giant vacuum where everybody honestly believes, like even Allison herself said it, like I feel like this is a conspiracy. Like there's like an agenda here. And the reality is that there is no agenda. The reality is that there is no conspiracy theory to like get all of the kids addicted to fucking hormones so they're all impotent and they can't have kids and the West is going to fall and China's going to come over and take over fucking everything. It's all bullshit. It's all just smoke and mirrors. What it comes down to is that we are on the precipice of being able to help people who suffer from gender dysphoria. We're coming to terms with the idea that there are ways to prevent people from going through puberties that they don't need to go through and ways to help them avoid getting unnecessary surgeries later in life. And what we're creating is this weird pushback effect where when we have these leaks where there are conversations that need to be had in earnest, let's talk about informed consent. Let's talk about what it means to fully give informed consent. Let's talk about the actual risks associated with HRT. Let's talk about the actual risks associated with surgery. And then let's take that in and then let's zoom in even farther to the micro and talk about how this affects children. These are really important, really substantial conversations to have. But the problem is people like Guardian and all the people that got their hands on these fucking WPATH leaks, they want to grab it and they take it and they're like, oh my God, this is the transgender agenda. This is the transgender medicine that's destroying the fucking West. When in reality, the conversations that we need to be having is like, okay, we see here that medical professionals are having real questions about what constitutes as informed consent. What are some of the risks of allowing somebody to pause puberty in Tanner stage 2 and then later get sex reassignment surgery? What are the ramifications of that? What are the risks associated with that? And how do we educate people better? And we take these conversations that people are having in earnest and we twist them as a way to say, see, even they don't know what the fuck they're doing. I think that the biggest issue with all of this, the damnest part of all of it is that this is an important conversation that needs to be on the table that people need to have. But instead it gets twisted and manipulated and just like fucked into the dirt into like this conspiratorial, like they're fucking transing all of our kids. And that's the most frustrating part to me. And even if they're doing it in good faith, which I don't think they are, that's where the conversation always goes.
So I think it's very comparable. I'm not trying to imply that there is some shadowy cabal trying to trans the children. Okay. I do think that it's a bunch of people who genuinely believe that there is this medical need that must be served, right? Or like children will die. I firmly believe, like, I think it's kind of comparable to like the dissociative identity disorder stuff.
Not
Like,
even
honestly,
close. Not even close. DID is even contested in the psychological and psychiatric community to even exist.
yes.
There's
Well,
there's no
did you
there's
see that
no
all the
contest
WPATH
taken.
clinicians believe in it? And
I
like
don't
Dan
care.
Gor-
They're not the DID association. It's the WPATH association.
Yeah, but I mean that the point is like DID, a lot of people don't think it exists, but it's still in the DSM because there is a group of true believer clinicians who fucking rally for the American Psychiatric Association to say that dissociative identity disorder exists in the book. You know, so many of them do not think it's real, actually. Like very, very reputable people do not think it's real.
Who
And yet it's
earnestly
like
debates
blowing the
that gender
fuck up on
dysphoria
social
isn't real?
media. What?
Who earnestly debates that gender dysphoria isn't real? No one.
Well,
Only what to do about it. That's the only thing that's debated is what is the best course of
a
treatment,
lot
even though
of
we have evidence-based practice.
a lot of WPATH people don't even seem to like that gender dysphoria is a diagnosis. And they like really believe that they seem to believe that it's only pathologized as a way to basically like get insurance companies to pay for the care. But that we're all just pretending that there's an illness. Obviously there's nothing pathological about trans identity. That would be transphobic of you to suggest that.
Well, that's
There's
true
like
to an
there's that like
extent.
what?
Well, that's true to an extent, right? The pathology of gender dysphoria itself is all the negative associations and symptoms that are related to it. Gender dysphoria itself wouldn't really be constituted as a mental illness.
I guess which okay, it's my opinions about psychiatry. Like in my opinion, I'm like a mental illness is just something that is in the DSM. Like it's just like a diagnosable mental disorder. Like which is like we've watered down the concept of mental illness a lot, but in my mind, that's
For
just like
sure.
practically true. Like when you get into court, that's what mental illness means is whatever's in the DSM. Like if it's in the DSM book, it is literally a mental illness, like effectively in society. Like whether you like feel great about that or not, like whether I feel great about like my various DSM labels applying to me or not, it's like it is literally practically true in society that the DSM is mental illness. So like I don't like Dan Karasik is an expert witness who they hired to testify in Little Rock against the Arkansas law, and he's one that super believe he calls himself a non-plural phobic clinician, and he talks about how there's a lot of trans and plural patients. So like I kind of that was the striking thing to me in the Wpath files. I was like, dang, seems like a lot of these clinicians might be vulnerable to fad like thinking. Like Diane Ehrensaft is a big pediatric gender transition like child developmental psychologist, and she literally was part of the recovered memory ritual abuse shit. It seems like there are some like clinicians involved in this that are susceptible to these like psychiatric hysterias of the past. And that is not me saying that gender dysphoria isn't real, but the idea of like the trans kid that like some kids know exactly who they are at 4 years old, like that is a very Diane Ehrensaft idea, and that's like the type of idea that I would expect somebody who was writing papers about recovering memories of ritual abuse in the 90s, like I would expect that type of person to believe in that type of thing.
Well, but the criteria for gender dysphoria in the DSM for adolescents and children is like pretty rigid. And like even if there is contestation of like the existence of DID, or even for a while there was that big fad of like tic disorders being really popularized, there isn't really like these two things like are comparable, where you have something that's like a highly contested issue because there's no way to like measure for it, there's no way to test for it. It's literally somebody just saying, oh, I have another person living inside of me. And even in the diagnostic criteria for DID, like it can be self-report, it doesn't have to be externally validated in any capacity. But if we have something that is like actually clinically proven to like exist, and we have a way to treat it, like there is no debate on whether or not gender dysphoria exists. There is a debate on whether or not DID exists. The only conversation about gender dysphoria is like how to treat it. So these two things being compared as one like doesn't really make sense to me. And it also doesn't matter that there's somebody on the Wpath like board that is like, oh my God, plural people. Like that doesn't, I don't know what that is supposed to do.
I just it's hard to put a word to it, but when you view like Diane Ehrensaft's commentary on trans kids is insane. She sounds insane, and she wrote the book on the gender affirming model for the American Psychological Association, and she is talking about how infant boys unzipping their onesies is a gender communication because they're trying to tell you that they want to wear a dress, or like a female child throwing her berets out of the hair is a gender communication. Obviously she's telling you she doesn't like female coded accessories.
Well, there's
Like
psychotic people that believe all this dumb shit everywhere, but that doesn't take away the validity of like people having
Yeah,
real
but
conversations,
when they're
if
right?
I may,
high up in the organizations.
yeah, if I may, right? Like if you had like someone who is writing the book on microbiology, right?
Mhm.
Do you think it would be concerning if you found out that they were an anti-vaxxer?
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. So I guess what Allison is trying to say, to kind of steelman her for a moment, is that you have someone who is, as she claims, writing some of the literature on how to diagnose these things. And some of the things they are saying are, again, assuming she's representing these factually and accurately, crazy, right? Throwing away your beret as a 2-year-old doesn't tell us anything, right? So if you have someone in that, I think, would it not be at least reasonable to have concerns over how the foundational materials that are being used to diagnose dysphoria, to diagnose these things within children? Don't you think that's of any kind of... It raises alarm bells to me, who is a layman on this. It raises alarm bells. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. Like I can see like somebody sitting on the outside and saying that somebody that sits on the board is saying like this crazy shit about like if a kid doesn't want to wear a dress or whatever, they're trans. Um, I can understand that for sure. Within that one, WPATH is not responsible for writing the diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria. So their opinion is kind of coveted, but it isn't really influencing diagnostic criteria by any means. It just sets
But
forth the guidelines.
diagnostic criteria don't do anything about treatments. Like there's no treatment
Diagnostic criteria,
recommendation in the DSM. So they do all the treatment stuff. They don't do the
yeah,
diagnostic stuff.
but if they do not meet diagnostic criteria, they can't get treatment, period. So the diagnostic criteria exists independently, and the diagnostic criteria for adults and for minors specifically in the US is very rigorous under the DSM. I think like a more apt comparison is like if you had like an astrophysicist that helped us land like a space rover on Jupiter or like on the rings of Saturn or something, but he thought that vaccines gave you autism, would we just throw away like all of his platitudes and achievements like with all of the astrophysicist shit? Probably not. Like there are people that believe crazy shit that will sit on the Wpath board and say like crazy shit about DID or say that like DID is real, even though it's like a hotly contested issue and so on. But we still look towards people that are writing the diagnostic criteria to gatekeep access to that care.
Response, Allison? That makes sense to me.
Well, I'm trying to find. I mean, I'm looking at it here that Diane Ehrenstaff participated in writing the Standards of Care 8. I'm pretty sure she participated in the children chapter, but I'm not positive for that. But it just says she was like she was one of the people who they thought was like
Standards
respectable
of care.
enough.
Can you explain what that is to someone who
It's
who
the
isn't
guide.
versed in these things?
Once you have a person that's been diagnosed with gender dysphoria,
So after the diagnosis, okay.
Yes. The standards of care set by Wpath outline how to best treat them according to Wpath.
Yeah, so it's just treatment. It's not the diagnostic criteria,
Yeah.
and the diagnostic criteria will gatekeep somebody's ability to access care.
Can I
Unless
ask?
you're
For
doing
the
it
Can I
for
record,
ask?
though,
research.
This
Dan
may be.
Karasik,
This may
the
be.
pluralphobic guy from earlier, he brags about participating in the gender dysphoria chapter and watering it down from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria, and with the intention of eventually eliminating it as a psychiatric diagnosis.
Before you go, Wick, really quickly, the reason that gender identity disorder was changed to gender dysphoria, one, was to make the criteria more specific and more strict and more rigid. And secondly, in a switch from the DSM-4 to the DSM-5, we switched away from towards person-first language. So like before you would say, I am autistic. Now you say, I have autism spectrum disorder. This is true of plenty of diagnoses that got switched from the DSM-4 to the DSM-5. That was an overarching theme. It wasn't because they were trying to get rid of gender identity disorder. They made the criteria more rigid and more hard and more rigorous for people to get diagnosed with and more specific to gender dysphoria. And they also made it so you were using like gender dysphoria instead of like gender identity disorder. You saw that with a lot of switches in the way that we talk about disorders from the DSM-4 to the DSM-5.
So can I ask, who is writing the diagnostic criteria for this?
The American Psychological Association.
Psychiatric Association. The American Psychiatric Association publishes the DSM. I have the DSM-4 TR and I have the DSM-5 on my computer. So we can see, because I'm not trying to do a gotcha, okay? I haven't like read these in a minute.
You're good.
I'm just actually
I got them
trying to
memorized by heart, buddy. I'm ready.
Okay.
No, this is just
I'm glad all of you are
a
researched because, God damn it, like, look, can I just for a moment, trans issues are hard because there's so much information and misinformation and disinformation out there on all sides. Like, it's hard for me who wants to actually get to the root of these issues to actually have an honest conversation. That's why I appreciate Allison. That's why I appreciate you, Malcolm, because you're both honest actors. You may be wrong, right? But
I'm never wrong.
None of you are liars, and so I appreciate that. Anyway, continue.
I have both of them up. If you want me to read them, I have them bookmarked. This is my one trick.
Wait, yeah, do it, because I'm just gonna be scrolling for like fucking 8 to 10 minutes. Okay, I'm still gonna scroll, but you read.
You're good. So in the DSM-5, so the most recent diagnostic and statistical manual, so marked incongruence between one's experience or expressed gender and assigned gender for at least 6 months in duration is manifested by at least 2 of the following. 1, a marked incongruence between one's expressed or experienced gender and primary or secondary sex characteristics. 2, a strong desire to be rid of one's primary or secondary sex characteristics because of the marked incongruence. 3, a strong desire for the primary and or secondary sex characteristics of the other gender. 4, a strong desire to be of the other gender. 5, a strong desire to be treated as the other gender. 6, a strong conviction that one has the typical feelings and reactions of the other gender. And then the DSM-4, where it was previously gender identity disorder, is 1. So it says a strong and persistent cross-gender identification, and 4 or more of the following. 1, a repeated repeatedly stated desire to be or insistence that he or she is the other sex. 2, in boys, preference for cross-dressing or simulating female attire. In girls, inconsistency with wearing only stereotypical masculine clothing. 3, strong and persistent preferences for cross-sex roles, make-believe play, or persistent fantasies of being the other sex. 4, intense desire to participate in the stereotypical games and pastimes of the other sex. 5, strong preferences of preferences for the playmates of the opposite sex, excuse me. And then B is discomfort with his or her senses of inappropriateness about gender roles of said sex. C, the disturbances not concurrent with the physical intersex condition. And D, the disturbances causes clinically significant distress or impaired social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning.
So it's, again, having just heard these, not even having them up to read them, it's really hard to make any like firm kind of thoughts on this. But the thing that sticks out to me, and you can disabuse me of this notion, but in the DSM-4 they have 4 criteria you have to meet. In the DSM-5 they have 2. But you did say earlier that they made this stricter. That doesn't seem to line up. Explain what the difference is here.
I'm sending both of you
Right
guys the
back.
links
I'm
for these
still
so you can have them in front of you
Please,
if you
thank
want to
you.
look at it.
But
So-
to my question, right? Like it sounds like if you're like, again, as a layman, and please, I'm not a medical professional by any means. 4 is more than 2, so it seems like 4 would be stricter than 2. Why is that wrong?
So one of the important parts, there were a few changes that they made when they switched to gender identity disorder. So one of the first ones is that they specify the duration. So they say that it has to be distress for occurring for at least 6 months in succession, and this has to be documented in order to get a diagnosis. So, if I go to the therapist on Monday and I say, yo, I've been having these symptoms for 6 months, no go. It has to be documented for 6 months by a therapist in order for me to get a diagnosis. Additionally, in the DSM-5 criteria for gender dysphoria as opposed to gender identity disorder, there's a lot more emphasis on like sexual and physical dysphoria. So like the idea that like you are dysphoric or distressed over not having a penis, over having breasts, over not having a breast, that you want the stereotypical sex characteristics of another sex, or that you are uncomfortable about your sex characteristics. In the DSM-4, they put a lot of emphasis on social behaviors. So a lot of it is, so under the DSM-4 criteria, you could have a child that would meet this criteria by playing with boys, wanting to wear pants, wanting to say like, oh, I play with boy toys because I like boy toys. It's a lot more social behavior. So the emphasis on like physical and sex dysphoria is a lot more rigorous, where in the past, like somebody who was a cross-dresser or somebody that was a tomboy could clinically fall under the criteria of gender identity disorder. The gender dysphoria is less criteria to meet, but it's more targeted towards the idea of sex dysphoria, which is what they wanted to emphasize.
Okay. Do you have anything for us, Allison? Are you still getting ready?
Okay, so Kenneth Zucker has addressed this criticism, and he said,
Can you
and
define?
he was,
Can you tell us who that is?
yeah. So Kenneth Zucker is actually, he was the chair of the gender dysphoria chapter itself, and he participated on the gender identity disorder chapter. He, for the record, puberty blocked patients, cross-sex hormoned minors. I think he referred a number of minors, at least for top surgery. Like, he's not anti-pediatric transition, but he's pretty honest about the fact that he thinks that a lot of some of the newer cohorts are like sociogenic in nature. Like, this is like, like he's been doing gender identity stuff since the 70s, and he's like, obviously something has changed.
And for
He gets
preface,
shit.
he got fired because he was practicing conversion therapy under the ban of conversion therapy in Ontario. That's
So,
why he was
okay,
fired and left his job.
I'm sorry. I don't think what he did was conversion therapy.
Okay, hold on.
There
Stop.
Canadian law.
Stop.
But,
What the fuck? Okay. So when you say what did he do?
Okay, what he did, he was under the impression that, like, obviously, if you have a child under 10, it's preferable that that child identify with their birth sex and not go on to, like, potentially become sterile and anorgasmic forever. Like, he was like, obviously hormones have physiologic consequences. He was like, that can't always happen. Sometimes it persists into adolescence.
Okay, but
and he was of the opinion that if they were gender dysphoric through puberty, that they were going to stay gender dysphoric forever. But he believed that prior to puberty, you could like basically help them not disassociate from their body anymore. And that prior to puberty,
what did he do?
I think he said, so the thing that gets cited a lot is the dolls. The dolls. They portrayed as like the Barbie police. You've got an effeminate little boy and he's coming in and taking away the Barbie. And he's like, no, and that is how it's framed. It's framed as him being like, oh my God, a boy doing feminine toys.
Okay.
He would come in and say, listen, no, most of these boys are going to grow up to be super effeminate, and there's nothing I can do about that. He goes, but most of these boys with gender identity, he was calling it gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria. He's actually in the papers calling it gender dysphoria before, like under the DSM-4 system. So he's like, I think a lot of times they were using this language interchangeably before that even happened, like in the manuals. But he was talking, he's like, a lot of these gender dysphoric boys, they're going to grow up to be effeminate no matter what, but they're young and they're either obsessive compulsive or likely autistic. They're very black and white thinking, and they genuinely do not get it through their heads that because they like more female typical toys and things doesn't mean that they are a female. They literally are not understanding
Okay,
that. They are like literally.
I
And so he
appreciate
would
it.
say, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I want to hear from Malcolm because Malcolm seems to be very okay with him getting fired for this.
Oh yeah.
Can you explain in your words
Mhm.
what he did and why it was you consider it conversion therapy and why
For
you
the
consider
record,
it
this is,
wrong?
I think, the clinic that Lawson Harrison was talking about earlier. Don't
Maybe.
know for
I
sure.
don't
I
know.
think
It
it
probably
was
was.
in his super chat.
But go ahead, please
Yeah.
explain it.
So I shot a link into the chat. I shot a link to Allison, and I shot a link to you. This is the 𝕵𝖎𝖎 study that goes over desistance rates and why they changed after we started practicing the affirmation-only care model. If you go to page 16 of the reader or of the document, excuse me, it's page 33.
Page 16 on the PDF?
It's page 33 on the PDF. It's page 16 of the actual text. So what they're talking about here is prior to 2012, we practiced what was called the therapeutic model to treat children that had gender identity disorder. And so the goals of this treatment are one, to circumvent the consistently observed sequel of GID, two, help children feel more comfortable with their biological sex,
And this is
three,
1.5
increase
treatment of children with gender identity disorder. We're talking about that?
it's 1.5.1, the therapeutic model. It's about halfway through the page on page 16. And then to increase the
I see it.
likelihood
Okay.
of desistance of GID into adulthood and adolescence, and to alleviate co-occurring symptomology of the problems or difficulties within the family dynamic, and blah, blah, blah. So this changed in 2013 when we switched to the affirmation-only care model. And so the therapeutic model is textbook conversion therapy, because the goals are to, one, circumvent the sequel of GID, to two, help them feel more comfortable with their biological sex, three, increase the likelihood of desistance, and four, get rid of all the other problems that they're causing their family, essentially, for being trans. Kenneth Zucker, after the ban on the therapeutic model and conversion therapy in Canada, after this was no longer the standard of practice for transgender youth, continued to use the therapeutic model in therapy. And that's why he lost his license, that's why he got fired, and that's why that got shut down, because they were still practicing conversion therapy.
Okay. Couple things. First of all, the part about fixing things in the family,
Mhm.
it his allegation was specifically that a lot of them have attachment issues, that a lot of them had early childhood abandonment. And like Stephen Levine, the like the standard of care 5 author who they like did away with because he wanted 2 mental health letters instead of 1, he said, bro, a lot of these kids are in foster care or they are adopted and like later in life. Like there is not, it's not like they have no reason to believe that there's maybe not something attachment developmentally going on when a person disassociates from their sex body as a child. Like it's not known for sure, but it is not known for sure that they're wrong. And we are talking about interventions that potentially leave you sexually crippled for life.
And
You know
these are
what I mean?
things that
It's
are
like,
heavily gate-kept behind a very rigorous set of criteria in order to access. And even within the affirmation care only model, exploratory therapy is not considered any kind of conversion therapy. So you are able to do exploratory talk therapy in the 6 to 8 months that you have to wait before you can even get referred for services to do that exploratory therapy. And it is not considered conversion therapy or against standards of care to, at the end of your 6 months of therapy, to say, I am not comfortable referring you for medical intervention.
for what it's worth, Kenneth Zucker asserts that he did perform exploratory therapy the whole time, and he did sue the Toronto hospital that fired him for wrongful termination, and they did settle. So they didn't admit, and they did issue an apology. And I don't know if they officially admitted
Wait, hold on.
wrongdoing, but
So
they settled and said sorry.
the clinic who he was
Toronto,
Toronto,
CAMH,
so the city of Toronto. So he sued the city of Toronto.
the hospital.
The hospital. They settled with him, and they may not have admitted wrongdoing, but they said they apologized for it,
Issued an apology.
and he got
Yes.
money for this.
Yes.
I look, this I don't know about. I'm gonna be clear, gang. To my audience, I have no idea about this situation at all. Maybe I have to look into this because that seems, I don't know,
Jesse
man.
Single has done a long post about the firing of Kenneth Zucker.
And Zucker
And
should have been fired, and they should have closed the clinic 3 years earlier when he got fired.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, they do think that it is like evil to say,
I'm not
hey,
morally loading it. I'm saying that conversion therapy is wrong.
conversion therapy is wrong, but I mean,
Mhm.
fuck, is trying to make an anorexic person non-anorexic conversion therapy. You're converting them to a
No, because a
non-anorexic person.
conversion therapy
You're trying
is
to make a
not.
gender dysphoric child not gender
No.
dysphoric,
So there's
fine with their body.
two big
Is that
things.
conversion
One,
therapy?
anorexia is a dysmorphic disorder, not a dysphoric disorder. Dysmorphia targets your perception of yourself. So somebody who has 0% body fat, who is literally a walking skeleton, that sees themselves in the mirror is still going to have a distorted perception of reality and still think that they're fat. Dysphoric people recognize reality with a desire to change it. That's why you can never starve an anorexic into feeling better about themselves, because they will always perceive themselves as being overweight and being fat. Second of all, when we talk about anorexia nervosa and bulimia, these kinds of treatments are not automatic behaviors. Things like internal identity, things like gender, not expression necessarily, but gender identity, sexuality, things like that are automatic behaviors that are proven to not be affected by behavioral modification therapy. Things like anorexia and self perception, as far as eating habits and relationships with food, are things that you can tangibly change. The reason that conversion therapy is unethical with automatic behaviors like gender identity, sexual orientation, things like that. This is also seen in like stimming with people with autism or other intellectual disabilities. The reason that these things cannot be changed is because they're automatic behaviors, and it's unethical to force somebody to change an intrinsic part of themselves.
I guess the comparison to homosexuality always fails for me because gay people don't need drugs or surgery for being gay. So it seems obviously like homosexuality is not pathological. But when people are like depathologize something that literally requires drugs and surgery or they might kill themselves, I'm like, how does that make any sense?
Well,
How
because
does
if I'm distressed about a physical characteristic on my body that within reason I can modify without being incredibly detrimental, like getting my tits chopped off, which I did, God bless them, miss them every day. Just kidding. When you think about something like that that is modifiable in a way that would alleviate distress to little to no damage to myself, as far as I am informed and I am offering consent to have this part of my body that offers no functional use to me, then what is the harm if it alleviates my dysphoria? Because it's easier for me to get top surgery than it is for me to be fucking doped up on antipsychotics and mood stabilizers for the rest of my fucking life in order to manage this.
I don't have issues with adults who are not acutely unstable making decisions about like, maybe experimental, maybe not experimental psychiatric paths that they want to take, right? Like I've read
Not
Dr.
experimental.
K. I mean, okay. I think most psychiatric meds are experimental, including gender dysphoric stuff. So like I take psych meds that I think are experimental. I take anti or fuck neuroleptic tranquilizers, atypical antipsychotics, and anti-epileptics, mood stabilizers. Like that's what I take, and it's well known that lithium is the gold standard for bipolar disorder, and we're just kind of trying and seeing what works because lithium causes a shit ton of organ damage. You know what I mean? Like adults do experimental shit. Like for me saying it's experimental, it's like I think people have a like untreated mental illness is a bitch. You know what I mean? Sometimes you want to make yourself a lab rat to like get better, and it's whatever. Like I have this opinion literally about my own body. Okay, so I'm not like loading that, but and so that is. But for kids, pediatric bipolar disorder, I consider that a scandal, and I consider the fact that they give the drugs that they give to me to kids, I consider that to be a scandal. Be-
At some point, like medical intervention
just
has to
got dark.
happen. Like at some point, those kind of things have to happen. If you have somebody who is having a psychotic break, and it's somebody who's either going to hurt themselves or hurt other people if they are not medicated, it doesn't matter if they're 16, 22, 35. It doesn't matter. At some point, somebody like that has to be medicated. And
Well,
as
we're
far
not
as like
talking even about
as far as
16. We're talking about like 8. Like pediatric bipolar disorder, it's like kids in elementary school that are having
if you have
severe
an 8-year-old that's
outbursts.
going to claw their fucking eyeballs out if they aren't medicated, do you let them claw their eyeballs out?
I mean, no, I guess if you've literally got a kid that's gonna claw their eyeballs out, then like I guess you would like bar out your kid. But like allegedly, a lot of kids that are diagnosed with pediatric bipolar disorder are just like
Okay, I just
particularly
want to.
rambunctious and like authority defiant
Yeah, I
children.
just want to be clear.
And
We're
it's
not talking to like that. That's if we want to broaden the scope of this discussion to medication of kids in general, I think that's fine. It's just not the purpose of
no,
today's
that's fine.
topic.
I
Does that
just
make
I
sense?
want to I want to establish that this is coming not from. I mean, we all have biases we don't know about, right? Maybe I got some shit going on I don't know about. But I think this is coming from my like wacky mentally ill person's ideas about psychiatry. It's not like some bigger gender identity thing I have. I actually believe that like what we let adults do to themselves in pursuit of like psychiatric serenity, that's different than what we do to children. Like, and I think every single chapter of the DSM should be like that. And there's a book
Yes.
published. It was a psychiatric manual published right before the DSM-5, and they begged the authors. They said there is this faulty assumption in American psychiatry that the child brain is just kind of like a tiny version of the adult brain. They were like, that's wrong. It's like probably a developmentally like it's probably completely different. And so, just for instance, giving adult bipolar meds to kids, same drug, same doses, that's insane. But just because they look the same doesn't mean they are the same. And I feel like a similar thing happens in like gender dysphoria chapter of the DSM, where like I perfectly, like, I have literally talked to people who have had double mastectomies. They have no regrets, and they truly seem like more mentally stable afterward. I don't have any reason to believe they're lying to me, right? Like, I'm not trying to get in their way. um but we have these WPATH clinicians, and they're just like, yeah, mentally ill teenagers sometimes need permanent sex trait modification, like hardcore. They're gonna like, it does seem very like, it seems hysterical. It seems like cultural craze, like
Well, even
madness,
if we
like.
talk about like surgical interventions for minors, it is exceedingly rare for minors to get vaginoplasty. It is unheard of minors getting phalloplasty. And top surgery is only done in exceedingly rare circumstances. I think it was last year there were like 6 total that were done in the US. Like these are things that are incredibly rare. And so even if we say, you know, like, oh, these few times that they're happening, I'm against it, that's cool. But to like kind of hyperbolize and say, oh my God, like my kid put on a dress the other day, I took him to Planned Parenthood and they blow darted them from across the fucking room with estrogen. Like the kind of hysterics that are around it where like you can literally go to the doctor and say, I feel like a girl today, and they are immediately writing you a prescription and a diagnosis is just not true. And again, all of the access to this medical care is gatekept by the diagnostic criteria.
Okay, so in my mind, what happened to Jazz Jennings is not unethical because Jazz Jennings was 17 and technically legally a minor when the genital operation happened. Like, Jazz Jennings was on the put on the path to happen. What happened at least 11 when the puberty blocker went in the arm, but realistically maybe 5 when they socially transitioned Jazz at the public school and legal documents were changed to F. So that's the ethical issue. Like, you could have waited 6 months to cut Jazz Jennings, and I wouldn't be like, oh, it's fine now. Like, this kid has been reared up since the age of 5 to have serious problems with their body, and at 11 they were developmentally stunted in a way that left them very vulnerable to an already dangerous surgery that was naturally always going to be sold to them. Like, I, we say minor, not a minor, minor, not a minor. They're puberty blocking these kids at like 9, 10, 11. They say that in the papers, Tanner too. Like, it's early on. And yes, 98% do go on to cross-sex hormones. Like, and I would say of these males that like, a lot of them don't want child-sized dicks forever. They're going to be more likely to want the vaginoplasties than the adults that don't oftentimes get it. And it's more dangerous for them. It is more dangerous for them. Marcy Bowers has said the peritoneal pull-through vaginoplasty, which is what Jazz got, has higher complication rates. And the colon vaginoplasty, which is what they do in Europe, which is what they did to the Dutch kids, the Endocrine Society sites, has higher complications, such that 4.5% of male participants cited in the Endocrine Society guidelines, the studies underlying it, died on the table from E. coli, because that's what happens when you redirect a portion of the bowel to this like open orifice in between your legs. It's an insane medical thing to do. And these kids that are puberty blocked are set up for it. And I don't really care if it's sold to them at 17 and a half or 18 and a half. It's equally unethical to me, honestly. Like, yeah.
Okay, we're getting to closing statements because I do have to go tonight. I'm gonna consider that yours. That was a pretty good.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm out with that one.
Pretty good ending. But I want to give Malcolm here the last word on this topic, and then I'm gonna
Right, let's
tell you
go.
guys what we got coming up for the rest of the week, and we'll close it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the WPATH leaks themselves were kind of handled disingenuously. I think that there's like a big mass hysteria around kids like being trans left, right, and center. And we know that this is like an incredibly rare thing for children to access medical transition, and it's even more exceedingly rare for children to access surgical intervention in any kind of meaningful capacity. I think that there is a really big and a really important and a really fun's the wrong word, but it's a really interesting conversation to have to talk about like break apart all of these different questions that we have about like what is dangerous about transition, what are the side effects, what are the risks associated, what does it mean for a child to be able to offer consent in a medical capacity. Like all of these are really good interesting questions, but it always gets watered down into like this dumb shit where it's like, oh my God, like all the kids are getting trans, like the trans agenda is taking over my children, like all this shit is so fucking dangerous and it's all experimental and it's all brand new and it just came fresh off the presses. Again, I think that when we're talking about the WPATH leaks and the access of care to children, I think that these are decisions that are gatekept behind a pretty rigorous diagnostic criteria. And I think that it's important for us to be mindful that the standards of care or the standards of practice set forth by WPATH are, again, heavily gatekept, and that in general, we shouldn't be barring access to treatments just because we personally don't like them or we think they're icky. And there's plenty of research and plenty of literature about the effects of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. So,
Okay.
yeah.
No, thanks both of you for being here. I know it's a fraught topic in many ways, but I think it was important to discuss. Allison, I thought
Just the easy stuff, Israel, Palestine, child transition,
yeah,
just casual.
just the the simple
Icebreakers.
things, yeah. The little things. Where can people find you, Allison, if they want to find you? A few people have asked me.
You cannot.
Cannot.
I'm here.
Wick exclusive, gang. Gang, this will be a semi-regular segment we do with Allison, who comes on to explains to me from her particular worldview. Always well researched. Don't always agree with her, but it is what it is. It's a fun discussion. Malcolm, thank you for being here. Where can people find you if they want to find you?
Sure thing, bud. My Twitch is FT Mongoose, and then my Twitter is FT Mongeese. I am generally a one-trick pony. Trans stuff is usually all that I argue and all that I talk about, but I've been indulging a lot in drama lately. It's really been satiating my spirit. So if you want to come and talk shit, I am always game.
The
Always game.
drama. Oh, I don't know how I feel about that. But are you going to be streaming after this? Because we'll right into you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll do that. Gang, let me just tell you what I got coming up real quick. And again, if you like this content, if you thought this discussion was interesting, if you enjoy what I have to offer, and we do a wide variety of things today, we talked about the Guernica. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Controversy, an impassioned discussion that if you want to see Angry Wick, tune in, rewind to the beginning of the segment, and you'll see Angry Wick. But here, the WPATH thing is very interesting to me, and I'm glad we were able to discuss that. Tomorrow, we're going to have 𝕵𝖎𝖙 on. We're going to have 𝕵𝖎𝖙𝖘𝖍𝖔𝖜. We're going to have Tachyon Blue, and we're going to have 𝕾𝖍𝖎𝖙, and we're going to be talking about the Sweet Baby Inc. stuff. What that all is about, what that has to entail. Is it Gamergate 2? Are we having another Gamergate, gang? I don't know. Tune in tomorrow. Find out. Then, on Wednesday, we're going to have Hutch, Rashad Crenshaw, and Josiah from Pondering Politics. We're going to have them, and they're going to be facing against Rob Noor. They're going to be facing against Admiral Gibbs, and they're going to be facing against Lauren De Laguna. Trump, has he been a positive or a negative for the Republican Party? Tune in. Going to be great. Thursday is going to be call-ins. I don't know what we're going to have Friday, but we'll have something. Anyway, for that, we'll read out and wave bye-bye, kids.
Peace and blessings.
I have to go immediately, but it's been fun talking to y'all. I hope y'all have a lovely night.
Bye,
No, thanks for
Allison.
being here. Bye.
I know I'm mean to you, but I love you.
No, I love you, Malcolm. We vibe. We can disagree and
Sweet.
vibe. Okay, you're a cool person.
Vibing. And thank you for the bits. No nonsense. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, I think it worked. See you later, buddy.